Chapter 639. The ninth young master was dumbfounded. He pointed at himself. Me? Li Yunxin smiled. It can't be me. Why not? The ninth young master stood up. It should be you. You are capable and have done a lot of things. Haha. You are telling the truth, Li Yunxin said. But because of this, no one is willing to give me a lot of power. Because I can't help but make trouble. As for you, the smile on his face faded as he said this. The sunlight shone in from the window and shone on his eyes. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and looked at the ninth young master. He suddenly said something irrelevant. Ninth young master, do you know how the rain falls? The ninth young master didn't find it strange, because what Li Yunxin asked was what he knew the most. So he answered without hesitation. Of course I know. I'll use my demon power to walk. Li Yunxin waved his hand, walked to the window and sat down on a chair. I'm not talking about our rain. But our rain is the same. Some places have faster precipitation, and some places have slower precipitation. Sometimes it's very difficult, right? Because in essence, a drop of rain needs to be formed like this. He waved his hand and a small stone appeared in the air in front of them. The ninth young master didn't seem to be interested in it at first. But now that Li Yunxin could see it with his supernatural power, his eyes brightened a little. It's like the dust in the air. Li Yunxin pointed at the sunlight shining from his shoulder into the room. Look, there are many dust particles in the sunlight. It's the same in the sky. When there's a lot of water vapor in the sky, it will slowly attach to the dust particles. It's like the dew on the leaves in the morning. He flicked his fingers and many transparent water droplets slowly attached to the small stone. The ninth young master was not stupid. He knew that those water droplets were the water vapor mentioned by Li Yunxin. As more and more water vapor gathered, it became bigger and bigger until it became water droplets. The clouds in the sky could no longer contain the water droplets, so they fell down and became rain. Li Yunxin flicked his hand again, and the water droplet in the void disappeared. Actually, everything follows the same principle. If you want to gather and form something, you must have a core of foundation. The core of people like us is the ocean of qi. All the meridians and acupoints are gathered in the ocean of qi and are connected by it. A family in the secular world will always have a backbone, a pillar of support. In a country, there would always be a center of power. A pack of wolves has a wolf king. A pack of monkeys has a monkey king. Taoist techniques, sword techniques, and painting techniques are the same. I used painting Tao methods to reconstruct your body for the same reason. Li Yunxin's tone softened. When you woke up on Cloud Mountain, you asked me how I created this body for you, and how you became Dragon Sun. I didn't say it because it was hard to say, and I wasn't sure about some things. But now I can say it. The ninth young master slowly straightened his body, and his expression became serious. He looked at Li Yunxin. Say it. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said, when the painting Tao is cultivated to the state of perfection, one will have the ability to turn illusions into reality. I used this method to reconstruct a body for the demon general beside me. I thought that since she used that body, she should have the ability of that body. She could spit fire, transform into a demon dragon, and even come back to life. But in the end, when the body was painted, it only had the ability of the body itself. Listen to me slowly. It's like I painted a man. The limit of what that person could do was the limit of an ordinary human's physical body. There's no way to surpass it. My demon general's body is the same. Because of the scales on his body, he is not afraid of slashes. Maybe because the structure of his body is different from humans, he has organs that can spit fire. So he can also spit fire. But there are no other magical or supernatural abilities. But then I met the evil king in Pitfall Mountain. Yes, that evil king. Li Yunxin laughed. The one you killed. Did you know the evil king was also painted by the art saint? But he was also painted. But he had supernatural powers and supernatural abilities, not just the power of his body. So I wanted to know what was going on and how she did it. After that, I experienced many things and saw many relics left by the art saint. I even seriously studied the insights left by the art saint in the translucent jade scroll, and finally realized this problem. I need a core. A core. Without this core, what I created is just an empty shell. It is an illusory projection in this world. Without a soul, it can't interact with this world, nor can it integrate into it. With this core, I can bring in some rules, even some rules that don't belong to this world. I think this thing is called a magic seed. At this point, Li Yunqin pondered for a while. He explained it in a simple way. Even the ninth young master, who did not know much about spells, now slowly understood. His eyes flickered for a while, and he asked the core question. Then, what did you use to make my core my magic seed to have me? To create you Long Sun is far more troublesome than ordinary people. Li Yunqin sighed, but this sigh was not helpless, but more like a sigh of satisfaction for what he had done. Long Sun is like a nesting doll, divided into 2 layers. One layer is the real body, your real body, the Bawei. The other layer is the human body that your real body has transformed into. So this is actually 2 cores. A small core make the Bawei. Then use the Bawei as the core to create your ninth young master. And this core of the Bawei is the reason why you were called the Master of the Sea. Li Yunqin looked at him. I once found a token in the Cloud Mountain's Qi Temple. It was neither gold nor jade, and it had dragon qi on it. It looked very much like the dragon god token that we are familiar with, made from the scales of Shinryu. At that time, Li Xinyu and I fought for the treasure together, and thought that it was trash. So I got it. So I used it to make the Bawei's core. The core has dragon qi, and it can draw out the abilities and supernatural powers of the dragons. I guided the dragon qi a little, and used the power of the Mother and Earth plate to mobilize the Earth qi, and finally created the Bawei. TSK. You don't know, in my life, I have rarely been as excited as I was at that time. It is one of the few wonderful experiences I have in this world. Li Yunqin said this and smiled for a while. It was as if he was recalling the scene at that time and retasting it. Then he waved his hand. After you created the Bawei, you should have integrated the mind of the ninth young master with the body of the Bawei. But at that time, I encountered some problems. I figured it out very quickly. When I was in the city of Wei, at that time, in addition to ensuring that I didn't lose my mind, I also needed the power of faith and the power of hope. And to create the body of the dragons in the realm of reality, I needed more power. The body of the Bawei became the core, and the power was attached to the water qi on the core. After all, it was from nothing, and the soul was not enough. So I needed something else. Li Yunqin raised his eyebrows. So I killed the Lord Tongtian. I took away his dragon qi. It was useful. I got rid of the 2 skeletons. No matter what it was also useful. So there is you now. Then ninth young master, guess what made the token? The core of your Bawei, the core of your human body, what is it? He asked this question, but the ninth young master didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he stared at him, wanting to say something but not saying it. After 3 or 4 breaths he said, You, Li Yunqin, why did you spend so much effort for me? Li Yunqin smiled. I promised you. You helped me pick up the things that Su Yusong dropped outside Yunshan and gave them to me. And I will make a new body for you. I promised you. And when I Li Yunqin do things, think about it, and do it beautifully. Otherwise it would be embarrassing to make one. You know it's my doing, isn't it? But the ninth young master was still looking at him. After a while he said, I won't eat your friend anymore. After saying this, he looked down at his palm. So what is it? Shinryu's scale. But its aura was changed by the art saint. Li Yunqin said in a low voice. Your human body was molded. Just as I was about to wake you up, the clone of the true dragon appeared in front of me. You should know that Shinryu is afraid of Dragon Son of the Land. At that time, they wanted me to create chaos in order to weaken their power and strengthen their own. I used a corner of her scale to make your core. In fact, it means that I created a direct descendant for her. It's not the combination of dragon essence and demon soul. It's just dragon energy. What Shinryu has always wanted is this method. Dragon Son of the Land has a demon soul in her body, and she was born with a rebellious nature. But you are almost her flesh and blood. You don't. This thing was not something that could be reasoned with. It's more like a Tao or supernatural power. Li Yunxin looked at the ninth young master. How did you feel when the godly lord appeared in front of you at the foot of the cloud mountain? Now when you think of Shinryu, how do you feel? You can experience it. In fact, there was no need to experience it. There were indeed similar examples in the human world. Many people always said that blood is thicker than water. This feeling of blood being thicker than water was caused by morals and habits in the human world. The ethical and moral system that had been passed down for thousands of years would constantly seep into a person's mind from the moment they became sensible, subtly influencing a person's thinking, imprinting this way of thinking deeply in their heart, turning it into something that could not be erased, almost like a biological instinct. It was common for a sane female beast to kill its young, but it was almost impossible for a sane person to kill a child under normal circumstances. Even if a cruel child wanted to kill his parents, there would always be many obstacles in his heart that he could not get over. But both were just living creatures. The only thing that humans had more than them was the ethical system that was almost solidified into a biological instinct. If this system was completely turned into a natural instinct in the form of a supernatural power, it would be the ninth young master's current situation. The ninth young master was stunned. He did not even need to experience to know what he was like. When he saw the godly Lord Shinryu at the foot of the cloud mountain, an uncontrollable feeling of intimacy rose in his body. When he mentioned Shinryu with Li Yunxin in the East Sea, he felt a sense of peace and joy. He wanted to give it a try to have the thought of killing Shinryu. But the moment this thought of giving it a try appeared, he instinctively suppressed it. This was a very strange experience. This experience was similar to the experience of a special group of people in Li Yunxin's previous world. He had come into contact with a group of people whose corpus callosum was cut off. The corpus callosum was a bundle of nerves that connected the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The left and right hemispheres of the brain had a division of labor. The left hemisphere could speak, while the right hemisphere could not. When this group of people was given an object with their left and right eyes, something strange would happen. For example, if the left eye saw a tangerine but covered the right eye, the left eye saw it and sent the message to the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere knew that it saw the tangerine, but because the corpus callosum connecting the two hemispheres was cut off, it could not send the message to the left hemisphere, which could speak. So when the person was asked to see what the tangerine was, the person who could speak could not say anything and only said that he did not see it. But when the person was asked to use his left hand to point out where the tangerine was, the person who said that he did not see it could point it out. It was just like the Lord Dongting and the Dragon's son clearly heard Li Yunxin talking about possession, but they did not hear it. The ninth young master's current instinct was similar to this situation. He could not even think of killing Shinryu, let alone betraying them. Seeing the expression on his face, Li Yunxin sighed softly. You have already experienced it. So, you asked me why the Dragon King of the Sea wanted you to do it. This is why. Only if you do it will Shinryu be at ease. The ninth young master stood up and murmured, I. Li Yunxin waved his hand. No need to thank me. If you did not save me a few times when I was still a human, I would not be here. Shinryu did not mention anything about the Dragon Son of the Sea to me. I only found out when I came to the East Sea. I then realized why Shinryu asked us to come here. He was probably afraid that we would retreat. Now that I think about what Shinryu said to me in the Cloud Mountain, it was all a hint. Then I can roughly guess the origin of the Dragon King of the Sea. Li Yunxin suddenly sneered. Trash Dragon King. Heh. Sooner or later, I will let them see who is the real bastard. Get rid of these bastards, and you will become the most powerful person in the sea. You will be below 1 and above 10,000. At that time, Li Yunxin stood up and walked over, patting the ninth young master's shoulder. Remember my kindness. But the ninth young master suddenly frowned and grabbed Li Yunxin's hand. Then what? Where are you going? Are you going to leave? Leaving me alone on the sea? Chapter 640. Li Yunxin smiled and pulled his hand back. Ninth young master, it's still early. Besides, if you really become the Dragon King of the Sea, you might be hoping that I'll leave soon. The ninth young master was stunned. He frowned and said solemnly, "I will never." Li Yunxin put up a finger with a slight smile on his face. "Nothing is impossible in this world. I'm not doubting what you'll do today or tomorrow. Ninth young master, I'm just telling you. If there comes a day when the world changes, and you are compelled to do something, to take something from me, just come and ask me. But don't take it secretly. We were enemies at first, but then we turned hostility into friendship. It's not easy to get to this point. Let's not do anything stupid." In Li Yunxin's eyes, the ninth young master was like a child. But even a child could be smart and stupid. There was no doubt that the ninth young master was smart. In the past, when a child was surrounded by powerful enemies, he was smart enough to endure silently for 1,000 years. This was something that few people could do. These days, he got a little carried away by his newfound power. But after listening to Li Yunxin's words, he quickly calmed down. He blinked and looked at Li Yunxin for a while, then said in a low voice, "Is something wrong? Or do you want me to do something else?" But Li Yunxin shook his head and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Don't you know me? I always like to say the ugly words first. Sigh. I just feel that there are too many plots and schemes in the world. When we get to the sea, we have to provoke the Dragon King of the Sea to do the same." He thought of the Lord Tongtian and the others in the past and sighed. "I thought that the world is full of danger, and the sea is no exception." As he said that, he suddenly paused and his whole body froze. The ninth young master was shocked. He had never seen Li Yunxin like this before. For a moment, he didn't know what was going on. "What's wrong?" Li Yunxin came back to his senses. "Ninth young master, I have something urgent to do. If I haven't come back by the time the boat reaches the East Sea chain, you and Shanji should get off the boat first and find a place to stay." As he said this, he turned around and was about to leave, but then he turned back and said, "Before I come back, don't touch the aquatic creatures in the sea. Remember this." At this moment, his expression was solemn, as if he had really thought of something extraordinary. The ninth young master only had enough time to say good, before Li Yunxin transformed into a stream of light and leaped out of the window with a swoosh, heading straight for the horizon. He had thought that he would only be gone for a day or two at most. But the next day, when the giant ship arrived at the East Sea chain, Li Yunxin had not returned. The ninth young master and Shanji got off the boat. Lu Baishui seemed to be relieved, but also a little disappointed. Li Yunxin didn't show up. He felt that maybe he was really a mortal in the heart of brotherly. Now that the identities of both sides were clear, they were naturally not people of the same world. Pointing out a way for him was extremely benevolent for the demon, so he had nothing to say. Therefore, the giant ship Taowu carried the disappointed Lu Baishui and continued to the Aquarius Bay in the east. These mortals still had to measure the sea slowly and kill time on the difficult journey, but Li Yunxin had already flown into the sky, and no one knew how far he had gone. So on the fourth day, the ninth young master and Shanji found an uninhabited island in the East Sea chain, waiting for Li Yunxin's news. Originally, they had talismans, the kind used by Taoist priests to talk far away, and one or two magic weapons. However, during these 4 days, there was no news from Li Yunxin, and he didn't even use these things. Shanji asked the ninth young master what happened that day, and the ninth young master told him patiently. Of course, he couldn't explain why Li Yunxin suddenly lost contact, so Shanji asked again. The ninth young master only gave his patience and good temper to Li Yunxin, so he couldn't stand Shanji's nagging. He showed his fangs to show his impatience. Shanji was so angry that he ignored him, and the two had a cold war for another day. On the 6th day, the ninth young master was also anxious. He asked Shanji shamelessly, but he thought of something. But how could Shanji think of it? The two were worried about each other again. They didn't know that at this time, Li Yunxin was actually in the East Sea, on an island in the East Sea. The island was very small, only about the size of 3 or 4 tables. Li Yunxin sat cross-legged, isolated from all the wind and waves, and looked at a picture in front of him. This picture was the imperial map of Sky Scripture he brought out from Yunshan. It used to be very big, but now it was shrunk by him. But he had good eyesight, so he could still see it clearly. Originally, Only the terrain of the 36 countries in Midland was marked on the map, and the surroundings were all white. He didn't have time to map it. Every country had the crypt that Li Yunxin had seen before, and they were marked with special colors. These crypts formed the formation that sealed the Rock King, and this imperial map of sky scripture was actually the distribution map of the formation's eyes. Yun Shan already knew this information when he obtained the map. Later, Li Yunxin left Yunshan and went all the way to the East Sea. He walked slowly on the way, memorizing the terrain and landforms he saw along the way. He was a big demon in the mysterious realm, with good eyesight and supernatural powers, so he could do a mapping. So he supplemented the imperial map of sky scripture along the way. At that time, he didn't do it with any special purpose. He just faintly felt that this picture wasn't that simple. He couldn't figure out the art saint's way of doing things. Since this picture was placed in Yunshan's treasure house, there must be some other meaning. Now that he was in the East Sea, he added this picture to the East Sea. When he was talking to the 9th young master, and said that the world is full of traps, and overseas is no exception, he suddenly thought of this picture. When he said that it was a trap, he actually thought of the crypt in Midland. When he said the second sentence, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. In the East Sea, would there also be a so-called crypt? The reason why he was suspicious was because of another thing. That thing seemed to have nothing to do with what he was thinking now. But in fact, it was inextricably linked. It was an old case that had been unsolved since he was in Dongting. After the battle in the city of Wei, Kun Wuzi chased him to the Dongting, and Hatred also appeared. Hatred held the dragon token, and claimed that Shinryu asked him to take the dragon soul. But the Lord Dongting said that it was a trick. He told Li Yunxin that the kiss of the 9 sons of the dragon was the key to unlocking the seal of Dongting. With Dragon 9, there was no need for Hatred to undo the seal and take the dragon soul. Therefore, he thought that Long Air pretended to be in a bad situation with Shinryu, so he went to the Dragon Island. Later, when Li Yunxin got along with Long Air, he also thought that it was Long Air himself who did it. The purpose was to get the dragon soul and make himself stronger. However, later, he slowly realized it should not be so. The Lord Tongtian Hatred never showed any interest in the dragon soul from the beginning to the end. Instead, he made a big show with the Guqin master to make himself stronger with the souls of many demons. The reason was known before. When the dragon soul entered the body, the weak one would be slowly refined by the strong one. In the end, the refined one would also be affected. In short, the body would not be so pure. Later it was said that the Lord Dongting was killed. The real body was eaten by the East Sea Marine tribe for 3 days and 3 nights. Then the question is, if it was not Long Air Hatred who pretended to deceive the dragon soul, then who told him to do that? It was said that the Lord Dongting was killed and eaten, but now Li Yunxin was in the East Sea, and he had exchanged a few moves with the Dragon King of the East Sea. But he never heard him mention that. The Lord Dongting was a profound realm demon on the land. If he really died here, how could the King of the East Sea, who was very interested in the people and things on the land, not mention it? Li Yunxin then realized that he might have missed some important part. Without considering this important part, the plan he had already built in his heart about how to solve the problem of the East Sea had no flaws. This was not good. It might mean that what he was thinking was in someone else's strategy. So in these 6 days he did 2 things. The first was to destroy the lairs of 6 true realm sea monsters, and 1 profound realm sea monster in 2 days, and interrogate a total of 446 demons one by one, asking them if they knew that a demon on the land had been killed on the sea. The result was that they all knew. Even though the lairs of these 7 demons were far away from each other, and in different directions. Not only the Monster King, but also the small demons who had just transformed and couldn't speak fluently knew. I heard that someone went to eat. Li Yunxin went to ask someone. Someone was naturally arrogant, so he destroyed him. No, but I heard that someone did eat. So he went to ask another someone. In the end, in fact, none of them really ate the meat of the profound realm demon. The rumor that the demons in the East Sea ate for 3 days and 3 nights seemed to be only a rumor. So after killing these 7 demons in one breath, he finally thought that Lord Dongting might not be dead. Someone deliberately spread the news in the East Sea, letting everyone know that the profound realm demon from the land, Lord Dongting, was easily killed by the Shinryu. Why? Who? In the remaining 4 days he did something else. He looked for something that might exist on the sea, like the crypt on the land. The chi of the world had been messed up by him, so it should have been impossible to find it. But before, the Lord of the East Sea sent a clone to die in front of him, and he sealed it in the painting. The Lord of the East Sea was inseparable from the chi of the entire East Sea. By sealing his clone, he naturally had a rough idea of the direction of the chi of the sea. Therefore, no matter how difficult it was, he slowly found the clue. Finally, he found a sea cave. It should be similar to the crypt on the land. He used the same method to mark the sea cave on the Imperial Heavenly Map, and then compared it with the crypt in the 36 countries. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. Originally, there were 36 pieces that formed a complete picture. But now he found another piece. Putting it on the jigsaw, he realized that there were other patterns outside the jigsaw puzzle. But he couldn't match it yet. So in the territories between the East Sea and the 36 countries of the Midland, there should also be other crypt and jigsaw puzzles. Therefore, he made another trip to the East Sea. He didn't go anywhere else. Instead, he went straight to the lair of the new Freemasonry in the country, which Pan he had told him before her death, the area around Baishan Road and Sujia village. His intuition told him that there must be a connection between the skeleton, the crypt, and the Yunshan elders. Then, the location of the Freemasonry's secular lair might also be there. The result was surprising, but it was also within his expectations. The Freemasonry's lair was indeed a crypt. But Li Yunqing couldn't go in. Some kind of powerful restriction protected the lair. That power was different from the power possessed by demons and cultivators. But Li Yunqing wasn't unfamiliar with it. It was the power of the skeleton. If there were indeed such terrifying skeletons in every crypt, then the new Freemasonry was undoubtedly trying to use the power of the skeleton. This discovery made him realize that things were far from over. Or in other words, although the new Freemasonry had been abandoned by the Yunshan elders, it might have become even crazier because of this. It was like a mad dog without a master to restrain it. He then completed the puzzle piece of the East Sea Nation. The passage between the easternmost Qi Nation and the sea cave in the East Sea, as depicted in the Huangyu Heavenly Map, was now connected. In his mind's simulation, the Qi of heaven and earth, which originally formed a system within the 36 countries of Midland and formed the grand formation that sealed the Rock King, was divided into the East Sea. Passing through the East Sea Nation, it went straight to the sea cave in the East Sea. However, this part wasn't finished yet. This part was only one piece of a bigger puzzle than the 36 countries of the Midland. This meant that what Bai Yunxin had said to him, that this grand formation was used to seal the Rock King, was about to be overturned. There were crypts in the 36 countries of Midland, on land and on the sea. The grand sealing formation only used a part of them. So, what was the rest used for? Wu Jiasong claimed that the owner of Southernwood House was the reincarnation of the art saint. He also said that the reincarnation had forgotten many memories of their previous lives. So, did the current owner of Southernwood House know about this? Because of these questions, Li Yunxin decided to ask Hatred's soul. That day, under Yunshan, he destroyed Hatred's body and hooked the souls of Hatred and the 9th young master with the soul hook lock. The 9th young master was rebuilt by him, and Hatred was kept in his fan. These days, he wanted to ask him something several times. However, Yazi's current temperament was fierce, unlike other demons that could be easily subdued. How could the Lord Tongtian give in so easily? Therefore, he couldn't get any answers from him. Li Yunxin didn't waste any more effort, and just restrained him. There were still many wronged souls in his fan. Hatred couldn't do anything when he was trapped in it, and he had to experience the feeling of his mind slowly fading away. Eventually he had to give in. As a powerful demon, how could he bear to be one with those dirty souls? So after so many days he had been ignored. But this time, Hatred finally told him something. Therefore, he knew that when Hatred got the Dragon God token, and was ordered to go to Dongting to find the Lord Dongting, He didn't know anything. There was a mysterious messenger who called himself the Lord of the East Sea. He carried the dragon god token and asked him to get the dragon soul on behalf of the Shinryu. Chapter 641. The Lord of Donghai. Li Yunxin asked Hatred about the appearance and temperament of the Lord of Donghai, who gave him the order. Although Hatred was very impatient and didn't say much, Li Yunxin could also realize from the few words he revealed that it should not be that Lord of Donghai. Someone pretended to be him. The appearance was the same as what Li Yunxin saw, but the temperament, style of doing things, and behavior were not the same person at all. He was lost in thought on the reef. Although he had always wanted to completely get rid of everyone's design and control, but he also knew that it was very difficult to do this. The other party, whoever it was, had been operating in this world for many years. If he really believed that he could start to fight against the whole world by himself, when he just came here, he was too naive. So the question now was whether he was still in someone else's plot. If he was he completely controlled like before? Or had he really broken the game? Which also made the other party's plot go out of control to some extent. Thinking of this, he calmed his thoughts for a while. He began to sort out the whole thing. At the beginning, someone wanted the dragon soul. This person asked someone to pretend to be the Lord of Donghai and give orders to Hatred. This showed that this person knew the situation in Donghai, even more than Dragon Sun on land. If Hatred succeeded, what would happen next? Maybe he would take the dragon soul from Hatred in some way. Because even in Li Yunxin's view, the former Lord Tongtian was easier to deal with than the Lord Dongting. The Lord of Dongting was scheming. If he was not trapped by love, there were probably few people in the world who could harm him and plot against him. But he actually refined his daughter, the Red Lady, into the carrier of the half-dragon soul. No one could have thought of that. At present, Li Xinyu was a variable. And this variable was now also involved in this matter. Because maybe it was that person, or maybe it was someone else who released the news. It said that the Lord Dongting died in Donghai in a very miserable way. What was the purpose of releasing this news? Li Yunxin frowned and pondered for a while, then stood up. He paced a few steps on the small island, still pointing at the dragon soul. At that time, it was no longer a secret that Red Lady was taken away by Bai Yunxin. If Shinryu knew, then the water demon in the lake might know as well. If such a thing were to spread out and someone with ulterior motives heard about it, then, was it to lure Red Lady to the East Sea? In fact, he had achieved his goal. On Yunshan, Red Madam expressed that she would take revenge for her monarch father. There was actually a common point in this incident. Both were disadvantageous to Shinryu. Whether it was to obtain the dragon soul, or to ask the powerful Red Madam to cause trouble for Shinryu. If the mastermind behind the scenes wanted to cause trouble for Shinryu, then who was it? Li Yunxin gradually had a candidate in mind. The Rock King. Because if he wanted to retrieve the dragon soul, he would not be able to do so. The best candidate would not be Lord Tongtian, but Bai Yunxin. The entrance and exit of Bai Yunxin's summer palace was in Dongting. Wouldn't it be more convenient to ask her to do things? If it was because of I can't ask Bai Yunxin to get it, in case others suspect me, it was reasonable. Besides, the Rock King intended to marry Bai Yunxin to Hatred of the Dragons. Was it because he planned to ask Hatred to get the dragon soul first? And then he would have a chance to get the dragon soul by marrying the dragons? The Rock King needed the dragon soul to be unsealed. The Rock King was sealed by Shinryu, so he naturally had the motive to do so. All the reasons were perfect. But it was precisely because it was so perfect that Li Yunxin felt that something was wrong. The person who had the ability to make such a layout should make the situation more confusing. At least, it shouldn't be seen through so easily. The perfect reasons he got now were too perfect. Perhaps for others, they were hidden very well. But for the Rock King, it seemed that they were deliberately put up for him. Bai Yunxin caught Red Lady, but she didn't take her to the Rock King. Instead, she ran around the world with her. If the Rock King was the mastermind, he shouldn't have made such a mistake. But excluding him, the people of Munanju and the Freemasonry didn't have enough reasons to do these things. Maybe they had the motive to do some of them, but they didn't have the motive to make the whole situation. It gave him a headache, just like before he went up Mount Yunshan. There were too many things and clues. Maybe some things shouldn't be taken into consideration at all. But now he couldn't tell. He had to kill some, and clear some like what he did in Mount Yunshan to make things clearer. What the hell? He didn't want to get involved in these things at first. But someone pulled him into the game. Seeing such a mess, he naturally wanted to figure it out. The person who pulled him in must have underestimated his curiosity, destructive power, and amazing persistence. Then he should figure it out. Thinking of this, Li Yunxin took a deep breath. He pinched the little finger of his left hand and pulled out a thin golden needle. Holding the golden needle, he walked to the edge of the island and shook it gently. The golden needle turned into a golden thread and went straight into the sea. Then, Li Yunxin slowly turned his wrist. The golden thread in his hand also turned. It was as if he was killing time in front of the vast and calm ocean. About 3 seconds later, some changes appeared on the surface of the ocean. There were some waves at first, but it soon became as calm as a mirror, as if the whole sea had been frozen. But there was a rumbling sound at the bottom of the ocean, as if there was a muffled thunder. The next moment the sea began to flow again. It was no longer undulating, but flowing quickly in the same direction. It seemed that there was a huge gap in the distance, and all the seawater began to pour into it. At the same time, the water level around the island where Li Yunxin was began to drop rapidly, and a white line appeared at the intersection of the sea and the sky. Until now he still couldn't see anything. However, after a dozen seconds, he would realize that he was now in a huge whirlpool. The edge of the whirlpool extended to the sky, and it was within its range as far as the eye could see. It was silent, but it made the surrounding sea rise higher and higher. In the end, the sky became a disk, surrounded by water walls. The rumbling thunder became one, and finally turned into a huge sound when the whirlpool flowed. He used the golden thread in his hand to stir up this terrible whirlpool, so deep that the bottom of the sea could be seen. Now that the whirlpool was formed, he took back the golden thread, put his hands behind his back, and waited quietly. About a quarter of an hour later, a golden light appeared in the sky 20 feet away from him, radiating bright light like the sun. The dazzling figure and the terrible momentum arrived together, just like when they appeared in the palace of the king of Donghai not long ago. But at that time, all the monsters in the palace were trembling, and no one dared to look directly at them. But now, Li Yunxin still raised his head and didn't even blink. When he met Shinryu for the first time in Dongting, even he was afraid and tried his best to guess what she was thinking. But now, half a year later, he was standing on the reef like a javelin, firmly nailed to the spot. Shinryu soon showed up. She looked at Li Yunxin majestically, and her solemn voice echoed in this big whirlpool. "I told you in Mount Yunshan. Don't disturb me before we land on the Dragon Island. What's the matter now?" Li Yunxin was still looking at her, but her voice was respectful and submissive. "Something happened. I need you to make a decision. I went to the East Sea Water Prison a few days ago to see the king of Donghai and talked with him for a while." As soon as he said this, he immediately felt the anger that was almost tangible. It was a little anger, but it seemed that the whole world was angry, and even Li Yunxin was bathed in this anger. "I told you not to talk to any monsters on the sea before we land on the Dragon Island." Shinryu frowned slightly. "What did you talk to him about?" She frowned, but this kind of human-like expression made her feel less oppressed. Shinryu seemed to realize this, and her eyebrows gradually relaxed. "I thought you were a person who could understand me." Li Yunxin smiled. "Don't be angry, Divine Lord. Let me tell you one by one. When you appeared in Mount Yunshan, you asked me to bring the 9th young master to the Dragon Island. He said he was curious about the new dragon son, and wanted me to show him the method to reconstruct the dragon soul. Then we all know that if we really study the 9th young master properly, he will definitely be beaten to the point that his soul will scatter. So in order to calm him down, I only said that you would give him some benefits on the Dragon Island, and he happily came." Speaking of this, Li Yunxin pretended to be a little surprised and frowned. "But when we got to the sea, we found there was also Dragon Sun on the sea. You didn't tell me about this." Jun Shang said that he thought that I would be able to understand your intentions. And that's exactly what I did. I thought, why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you tell me how to get to the Dragon Island? Before I set foot on the East Sea, I thought it was just a test. But now that I'm in the East Sea, I know you have other plans. You want me to kill them all, right? The shining figure looked at Li Yunxin calmly for a while, then said, if Lord Wei River is here to show off, wait until you get to the Dragon Island. After saying this, her body suddenly became faint, as if she was about to leave. But Li Yunxin said in a deep voice, Lord, this is not my only choice. Don't you want to hear what I said to the East Sea Lord? Shinryu's figure paused. Lord Wei River. Are you threatening me? When she said this, her tone was calm, and Li Yunxin didn't feel any anger. But the sky became dark, as if the time suddenly jumped from noon to dusk. But his expression was calm, and his tone became respectful. How would I dare to do this? It's just that I acted on my own, and contacted the person you wanted to kill. I didn't dare to not report it to you. Please listen to what I have to say. It's not too late to punish or reward me. After saying this, without waiting for Shinryu to speak again, she continued. When I saw the East Sea Lord, I told him. The true dragon god was probably afraid that the dragon sons would slowly become arrogant, and become a threat to the world with the water clan in the sea. So he asked me to get rid of them. He didn't believe me at first, but I spent a lot of effort to make him understand. So he panicked, and asked me what he should do. I said, the Lord sealed the Rock King in the past. Now the Rock King is about to be unsealed. If the East Sea Lord can kill all the dragon son on the sea, and become the only dragon king on the sea, before the Lord knows about the Rock King's appearance. If the Rock King attacks, the Lord will naturally want him to defend against the enemy. Why would he want to touch him? The Rock King is also in the Taishang realm, and the Lord should be. The two of you keep each other in check, and the Lord won't be able to touch him. Then he can protect himself. Isn't it the best of both worlds? The sky above the whirlpool became gloomier, and the rumbling sound of the water in the whirlpool disappeared instantly. The water wall rotated rapidly without a sound, and Shinryu's voice became a little cold. Since you have guessed my intention, you still said this to him. After saying this, you want to report it to me. Do you want to die? Li Yunxin still smiled faintly. Lord, please listen to me. I have an idea, but I don't know if it's right, so I need you to tell me. Once this is clear, things will be easier in the future. Otherwise, what I said to the East Sea Lord might come true. The water wall suddenly stood up. The big whirlpool that was like a bowl before suddenly turned into a well. The pressure in the well became extremely great. The rock island under Li Yunxin's feet suddenly turned into a cloud of smoke. Just like the silent whirlpool, when the island was destroyed, there was also no sound, as if the whole world was silent. Even the smoke, because of the extreme pressure, turned into a surging flame, was also silent. Li Yunxin lost his footing, but stood in the air without moving. But terrible changes also happened to his body. It was as if he was thrown into the furnace of the sea. Flames ignited on his clothes, but as they burned, they transformed. His exposed skin was eroded. It was like paper ash, with bright lines of fire winding on it. But his skin was also constantly transforming, which made him look like his body was glowing with fiery ripples. Soon, the whole space turned light red, and the well turned white. That was because the seawater was vaporized by the terrible heat, but it was trapped by an invisible force. Lord Shinryu seemed to be really angry. Her anger filled the space, causing a shocking and terrible change. This change made Li Yunxin, a mysterious realm dragon son, unable to keep his body intact. He could only resist but not fight back. It seemed that he didn't dare to fight back. He heard Shinryu's voice become calmer and colder. Wei River Lord, you are too arrogant. Your power has already made you forget who you are, and who Ben Jun is. I can destroy your soul in an instant. I can make you never say those lies again. Now tell me, what reason do you have for me to spare your life? Li Yunxin opened his mouth, so he immediately spewed out flames from his mouth. He blinked, and his eyes were immediately burned, but they quickly recovered. In the flames and the sound of the wind, he said, You are not the Grand Supreme. Chapter 642. His voice was swallowed by the howling wind. However, the whole world seemed to be quiet for a moment. The fire, water, sea, and hot wind were all frozen. But it only lasted for a moment. The next moment, the torture became even more intense. Li Yunxin's body was covered in small waves of fire. His body could no longer remain intact, and was quickly swallowed by the fire. His skin and muscles were quickly burned, revealing the bones and organs that were glowing red. He used the last of his strength to fight against the terrible heat in the well. His bones and organs were burned and reborn, but he could still make a sound. Although he was not using his body, he was using his supernatural power to agitate the hot air. That's why you are so dignified, glorious, just like those who really have power and wealth. They will never deliberately show off. You are either a nouveau riche, or you are guilty. Ha ha ha. My lord, don't be in a hurry to kill me, since I can say this. Is there no way for me to make you a real Teisho? As soon as he said this, the heat became even more violent. The glorious image of Shinryu remained unmoved in the fire, but Li Yunxin's bones and organs suffered even more terrible damage. Even he could not help but groan in pain. He did not speak anymore, and only endured the torture, as if he already knew in advance. After a full hour, the heat slowly subsided. Muscles regenerated from Li Yunxin's bones with great difficulty, and transformed into clothes. But now, he breathed in and out flames every time he breathed. The skin on his face was cracked, as if his whole body would turn into a pile of pieces at any time. Shinryu looked at him majestically. Whether I am the Teisho or not, you should know that it is easy to destroy you. Li Yunxin slowly spat out a cloud of fire. Small blisters immediately appeared at the corner of his mouth, but they were quickly replaced by new skin. I have experienced the power of the Lord of Gods. He panted and said, but I did not want to be the Lord of God's enemy from the beginning. This world is dangerous. I need to find a backer. And yet I want to know something too, and not live in ignorance. Divine Lord, I just want to know. You and the owner of Southernwood House and the Art Saint. The Art Saint, Shinryu said in a dignified tone. Master of Munanju. They are all my enemies. They want Dragon Island. That's why they asked you to do it. Do you think I don't know? Li Yunxin let out another breath of anger. Then, Dragon Island. It's not something you should know. Shinryu looked at him. Weishuekuan, do you have a way to atone for your sins by asking such a treasonous question? Amidst his anger, Li Yunxin realized that because of Shinryu's answer, a second possibility had appeared in the question he had thought about on the island. Initially, he felt that neither the Art Saint nor the owner of Konanju had any reason to attack Shinryu. Xianmen also had a part in sealing the Golden Rock back then. They should be more wary of the Rock King. But now, if what Shinryu said was true, a fake Lord of the East Sea, to declare his decree to hatred, this Lord of the East Sea could be created using the Art Dao. This was why hatred couldn't see through it. The people of Munanju were considered the Art Saint's old subordinates. This made sense. And it also made sense that they helped him gain power, and sent him to the East Sea. As for Shinryu, the first time he saw Shinryu, he had doubts in his heart. Just like what he had said before, those who had and were used to having great power usually didn't want to flaunt it. Many headmasters and faction masters of Xianmen rarely showed up in the mortal world. The Dragon Sun and the great demon kings on the land mostly lived in seclusion, because they didn't need others to acknowledge their power. But those who needed to be acknowledged should know what realm they were in. If they really met someone who didn't know when to stop, they just needed to teach him a lesson. There was no need to think about anything else. But when Shinryu showed up for the first time and the next few times, they were all brilliant and surrounded by the aura of treasures. It was as if she was afraid that others didn't know how powerful she was, and she was always declaring her authority. Li Yunxin knew that only people with a guilty conscience would like to emphasize these things. And only people with a guilty conscience would use terrifying high-pressure methods. Not letting others say it, not letting others think it, only letting others see it. For example, just now, he only said a disgraceful sentence, and Shinryu tortured him with terrible torture. If she really had great power, and the confidence to match her power, she wouldn't have done this. Didn't the two fake saints on the Cloud Mountain, when they appeared on the Cloud Mountain, didn't they have the same situation? She was afraid that others would question her authority. When this dragon mother saw Li Yunxin for the first time, she captured a dragon in the Dongting Lake and threw it to its death in front of the Ziwei Palace. She probably wanted Li Yunxin to realize what kind of power she had. Just this kind of deduction may not be enough to prove the strength of Shinryu, but what Shinryu did after that, asking the dragon's son to control, fighting, and watching the monsters on the land being sent to die under the Cloud Mountain, all made Li Yunxin feel that Shinryu was not the Shinryu of the past. She must have lost some of her power. The loss of these powers forced her to do something else to maintain her authority, and recently, when she thought that the monsters on the land were getting out of control, she used the hands of the dragon's son to send them to their deaths. And before that, she also showed goodwill to Li Yunxin, asking him to do things for her to control the dragon's son. If Shinryu was still in the realm of Taisho, doing this would weaken her power. But if she was no longer, it would make her safer. However, what prompted him to say that was Shinryu's extraordinary interest in his painting skills. He created a Kuroshio, which was equivalent to creating an individual with a dragon's soul and great power. Before the ninth young master's body was formed, and before he woke up, Shinryu appeared in front of him for the third time, promising him something, asking him to bring the ninth young master to the Dragon Island. Taisho would not care about the power of a mere peak of the true realm. What she cared about was this kind of method. She needed this kind of method. Then, Li Yunxin wanted to confirm this point. So, this point was proved when Shinryu flew into a rage. Maybe it was because of the previous battle with the Rock King, or maybe it was because of other reasons. Although Shinryu still had great power, she was no longer a Taisho. She hid on the Dragon Island for a long time, to prevent anyone from noticing this. When she found out that Li Yunxin had some kind of method that could allow her to regain her previous divine power, she came out of her legendary deep sleep. Because according to her, the Art Saint and the Art Saint's reincarnation were her enemies. She could not get this method from other sources. Then the last question was, what was on the Dragon Island? If what Shinryu said was true, what did the Art Saint and the owner of Wood South Ju want from the Dragon Island? These thoughts quickly turned in Li Yunxin's mind. While he was thinking, his body was still being tortured. Flames spewed out from his mouth and nose. Every breath was torture. His heart, however, was cheerful. He was nearer to some truth at last. And his original plan had become reality. So he smiled with difficulty. Kagami must have thought of a way to atone for my sins. Kagami lost part of her power for some reason. The rest of her power was enough to suppress me and any other dragon's son. But she couldn't deal with the situation when we united. So she asked me to do something for you in Dongting. He slowly raised his head, and his body also rose. He didn't look up to Shinryu, but looked at her at the same level. I think I did a good job. The eldest brother, the second brother, and the fifth brother are no longer a threat. The third sister, Kagami, should know that she is not an unruly person. The rest of them have no one to lead, and they won't make trouble in a short time. But I, Kagami, I am not a loyal dog. If you want me to do things for you, you can't cover my head. Kagami wants power, and I want the truth. The brilliant light on Shinryu slowly disappeared, and she finally showed her true appearance. At this moment, she looked like a beautiful and calm noble woman in the firelight. She even reminded Li Yunxin of Shangguanyu. She waved her hand again, and the fire in the air dimmed a little. For you, is the truth enough for you to risk your life now? What's the difference between living in the mystery and being a zombie? Besides, it's not that I want to know. It's you who pulled me in. Li Yunxin sighed. If Kagami knows that there is a way for you to regain your power, but you don't say it, how would you feel? Shinryu suddenly became silent. Li Yunxin was taken aback by the silence. Since he felt that there was something wrong with Shinryu and Dongting, he had been thinking about what he should say if it came to this point one day. He also expected all kinds of reactions from Shinryu, but none of them was like this silence. It seemed that she was thinking. It seemed that she felt the same. But it only lasted for a short while. Shinryu said again, "Then let me tell you. there is something on Dragon Island that can face the true god. Li Yunqin frowned. True god? Shinryu stretched her arms and retracted the pair of light horns on her head. She completely returned to her human appearance. This made her look more amiable. People in the world worship me as a god. They also call those people on Cloud Mountain immortals and gods. Even you, no matter where you are now, you can also be called a god. But these are just fake gods in the world. The real god is in the astral world. In the netherworld, the supreme celestial being, the netherworld mother. And on Dragon Island, there is an entrance to the netherworld. The art saint wanted to go to the netherworld through this entrance, kill the true god, and obtain the power of the true body. Now the owner of Southwood House, the former elder of the Freemasonry, also wants to do the same thing. I am guarding this entrance to the netherworld, eliminating their ambitions, and preventing the world from falling into chaos. That's why I lost some power. Li Yunqin was surprised for the second time. This was also an answer he never expected. A thought suddenly appeared in his mind. When he was on Cloud Mountain, he seemed to have accidentally seen the netherworld. He saw that the Black Yama King was nailed to death on a long lance. He did not know if it was a dream or an illusion, but for someone with his level of cultivation, no matter which one it was, it should mean something. But there were too many secrets between him and the two Yama Kings, so he could not ask. But at this time, he gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Is Black Bai Yanjun also a god? If he is a god, how could the Black Yama King die?" This time, it was Shinryu's turn to be surprised. She had always kept her emotions under control, always looking as calm as water. But because of this, after Li Yunqin said this, he sharply caught the fleeting surprise and joy on her face. It was also thanks to her dispersing the bright light on her body and the pair of bright horns on her forehead. Because of this subtle expression, Li Yunqin shouted in his heart, "Damn it, I almost believed her words." Shinryu said that he was guarding the entrance to the netherworld on Dragon Island, and said that he wanted to destroy the ambitions of those people in the world to kill gods and obtain power. But just now when he heard about the Black Yama King is dead, he was obviously surprised and happy. Damn it, this Shinryu's mouth is also full of lies and truth. I can't believe everything. Why can't he be more sincere and less deceitful? After losing her composure, Shinryu regained her calmness. Since you know about Black Bai Yanjun, you should also know about the Deva 5 decays. Gods can't live long. What's there to be surprised about his death? But you, where did you hear about this? Li Yunqin pretended to be ignorant and widened his innocent eyes. Black Bai Yanjun has not been in the world for a long time. The godly monarch should know about it. So I guess he's dead. The godly monarch guarding the entrance to the netherworld should know more than me, right? If Shinryu was lying when he said guarding the entrance, it would be hard to answer now. As expected, Shinryu was silent for a while, as if she was disdainful to answer. Then she should be looking for a reason, or a topic to cover up this matter. Li Yunqin gave her a way out. She changed the topic and asked, "Monarch, then are the Deva also true gods? There's an entrance to the netherworld on Dragon Island. What about the Deva?" Shinryu immediately said, "The Deva are true gods. If there's an entrance to the netherworld, there's naturally an entrance to the astral world." Li Yunqin then asked, "Where?" Shinryu then realized that the bottom of the stairs that were given to her was empty. She became silent again. But then she heard Li Yunqin shout, "Rock King, godly monarch, you're guarding the entrance to the netherworld. Is the Rock King guarding the entrance to the astral world?" Shinryu became silent again, as if she didn't know how to answer him. Li Yunqin stared at her again. Then about the matter of the Rock King being sealed. "Godly monarch, is there another story?" At this time, Shinryu seemed to be annoyed. The guy in front of her was too cunning. Once she talked to him, there were traps everywhere, and he would dig out all her secrets with just a few words. I can't be nice to him. She waved her big sleeves, and her body glowed again. "How can you ask about this? Wei River Lord, since you already know the secret of the netherworld, I want to know what method you have to protect yourself that makes you so arrogant." Chapter 643. Li Yunqin didn't ask anymore. He stopped and smiled. Since you asked me this, doesn't it mean that my life is safe? Juanshang, not only did I guess that you aren't Taishang, I also guessed. You were born from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and the wishes of mortals. Juanshang said that you are a fake god of this world, not a true god. But I feel that Juanshang is the god of this world. Li Yunxin's tone became sincere, and so did his expression. This made his words sound even more infectious, even sounding like he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Juanshang knows that I know some painting techniques. I used my painting Dao techniques to draw the 9th young master. Li Yunxin spoke even more slowly. She stared at the calm true dragon without blinking. But at this moment, the true dragon hid its emotions and put on an invisible shell for itself. So I can sense Juanshang's aura more keenly than normal people. And because of some of the insights I gained from drawing the 9th young master, I know why Juanshang is looking for a way from me. He paused. Juanshang's power comes from the heaven and earth different from us. We can cultivate and concentrate the power in our bodies to make ourselves stronger. But Juanshang is the source of your power. Where can you borrow it? So I guess that Juanshang could seal the dragon sun in the sea. The dragon king in the sea is different from us. We were formed from Juanshang's dragon soul, so we can be considered Juanshang's soul. And the dragon sun in the sea was sealed by Juanshang with Haitian territory. The principle is similar to Juanshang. They are formed from the spiritual energy of the sea and sky, which means they are a part of Juanshang, so they can be considered Juanshang's body. Juanshang used his soul to seal the dragon sun, which consumed his own cultivation. Now that he used his body to seal the dragon sun, his power is still in his body, but he lent it to them. So this is the right way. It's just that, now that Juanshang's whip is beyond his reach, if he wants to withdraw his power, it's naturally best to withdraw his soul. However, those fellows on the continent are difficult to deal with, so I can only settle for the next best thing, and withdraw my body. Li Yunxin said all of this in one breath and stopped. Dear Divine Lord, do I make any sense? Shimrya looked at him silently for a moment, then said, let's not talk about how you came to these conclusions. But it did make some sense. Then supposing what you know to be true, how can you save yourself? Li Yunxin's expression was solemn. So, in the end, divine monarchs want to take back the power of their souls and bodies. Dragon sun on land and dragon sun on sea should all be destroyed. I'm one of them. But thanks to the divine monarch, I'm extremely satisfied with this body. The demons among the demons are far stronger than ordinary ones. Where else can I find one? Thus there were only two ways. One was to kill a divine monarch. That was just wishful thinking. The second is to be a child that is beneficial to Juanshang, and live on forever. He paused. Now, I am a person that is beneficial to Juanshang. I created the 9th young master. The 9th young master does not belong to Juanshang's body, nor does he belong to Juanshang's soul. He was created from Juanshang's scales. With the help of those vengeful spirits, he actually has power close to the mysterious realm. For Juanshang, this power is practically free. Now that this 9th young master has become a human, in the future, I will put him on the continent. The people on the continent believe in both Juanshang and these dragon sun, which is enough for them to slowly accumulate more power. Moreover, because they were born from Juanshang's scales, they are not mixed with anything else, so they won't have any rebellious thoughts towards Juanshang. After they grow fat on the continent, and then withdraw their power, it will be enough for Juanshang to obtain the power of faith and incense in the world, and at the same time, become stronger. Today, I can create the 9th young master. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, I can create the 10th young master and the 100 young master. All I need is one of the divine monarch scales. These are additional supplements, just like how mortals raise pigs. Shimrya frowned. Vulgar. Li Yunxin hurriedly laughed. Divine monarch is right. Shimrya's vigilance and anger lessened. This meant that she agreed with Li Yunxin's words. Thus, the fire in the sea well faded a little, and the breath that came out of his mouth and nose was no longer fiery. He observed Shimrya's expression and said, but this method of saving my life, I still need to ask the divine monarch for help. Speak. When the 9th young master was a human, He needed a lot of spiritual power. I used the vengeful spirits to solve some of it in Cloudy Mountain, and thought of other ways to solve some more. But if I want to do the same thing in the East Sea, I can't kill him again. Not to mention that this is Jun Shang's long-term residence, and we can't lose the support of the demons. Even if we want to kill him, it will be difficult. So we still need a strong source of power. Li Yunxin's expression was focused, as if he was discussing some purely academic matter. Because of this idea, I have killed many demons in the East Sea these days, 6 in the true realm, and 1 in the profound realm. But I realized that their demon power is far from strong enough. But I met the Lord of the East Sea a few days ago, and carefully observed him. Jun Shang, the Lord of the East Sea can do it. Since the Lord of the East Sea can do it, the remaining 8 dragon kings of the sea can also do it. They have been managing the East Sea for 1,000 years, and the number of living creatures and demons in the ocean far exceeds that of the land. The power of wishes that they have accumulated cannot be underestimated. I can kill them all. The power that belongs to the sea and the sky will return to the divine monarch, and the power of wishes that belongs to them will be used to reshape the person I want to create. This is like exchanging the power of wishes for the dragon soul, but all the power will belong to the divine monarch. When he said these words, his tone and expression were calm and sincere. As sincere as when he discussed countermeasures with the Lord of the East Sea, and promised him to be the only dragon king of the East Sea, and as sincere as when he told the 9th young master that what he said to the Lord of the East Sea was all a trick, and that he was actually the one who wanted to be the dragon king of the sea. As he spoke, the anger around him slowly dissipated. An expression of interest appeared on Shinryu's face. When Li Yunxin finished, she said, "So you have been killing people in the sea these days for this matter?" As I said before, sharing the divine monarch's burden is also protecting my own life, so I dare not be careless. Li Yunxin smiled respectfully. "And draw a few boy toys for the divine monarch like how you drew the 9th young master?" Finally Shinryu smiled, but the meaning was unclear. "I hope that your purpose is as you said." Li Yunxin clapped his hands happily. "Then please give me a token, divine monarch. I will bring this to the Dragon King of the East Sea, and then I will tell him what we said today in a different way, so that he will believe it without a doubt. After that, leave everything to me. I will let these people fight among themselves, and help the divine monarch get rid of a big threat. Then we can carry out our plan. Next, we will spend some time raising these pigs, and the divine monarch can sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. Isn't that great?" Shinryu seemed to be unusually easy to talk to at this time. She nodded. "All right. As you wish." He reached out and plucked his left ear, then his right ear. What he took off was none other than a pair of earrings. They were fiery red, as if they were made from 2 drops of blood. She threw one of them up, and it slowly fell into Li Yunxin's hand. "This pair is not very useful, but I made them with my own blood. The dragon son knows all 9 of them, and has seen them before. Since you are asking for a token, let's use this as a token. 1 for you and 1 for me." Shinryu smiled again. "You do have a magical ability. As long as you are still on the sea, whatever you say, if I want to listen, I will be able to hear it clearly. It will also let me see how the way River Kuan usually does things, and whether he can do it." As soon as she said this, the one left in her palm disappeared. Li Yunxin held the blood-red earring in his hand, and his face revealed a surprised and happy expression. "Ah, is it made from the divine monarch's blood? I thought the divine monarch would be wary of me. Who knew that he would give me such a thing? Who in the world can have such an honor?" After saying this, he picked up the earring and carefully pressed it between his eyebrows. "Naturally, I will worship the divine monarch's reward. I will worship it with this skin of mine." At this time, his skin had already regenerated, and was even more tender than before he was burned by the fire. With the addition of the red dot on his forehead, it added a devilish beauty to his appearance. Not long ago, they were on the verge of falling out, but now, they were in a harmonious situation. Shinryu smiled. "The way River Kuan is considerate. Then go and do your work." After saying this, the sky shone brightly, and Shinryu's figure quickly disappeared. After Shinryu left, the surrounding wall like seawater suddenly dropped down. A terrifying roar resounded through the sky, and the huge force and violent turbulence almost overturned the bottom of the sea. The sea seemed to be boiling, and no life could survive in such an environment. After a full hour, the turbulence in the vast sea finally calmed down. But the sea had turned into a muddy yellow, just like the rivers on land that had just experienced a mudslide. At the same time, Li Yunxin was no longer there, but appeared on another island. It was also an isolated island in the East Sea, but it was bigger, with a white beach, lush green trees, and undulating mountains, but there were no signs of human habitation. Li Yunxin sat cross-legged on a rock by the sea, with a piece of paper on his knees, and a brush in his hand. This paper and this brush were very special, not because of anything else, but because they were the most common Xian paper and brush in the mortal world. It was not strange for them to appear on the desk of the poor scholar, but in the hands of the Wei River Kuan, it was strange. There was also ink on the rock, a shallow hole was dug, and there was some black liquid inside. But people who spend a lot of time on the sea should be able to see that it was squid ink. What was even stranger was that Li Yunxin dipped his brush in the ink, thought for a while, and wrote a sentence on the paper. I have drawn the 9th young master. This sentence was said to Shinryu on the sea more than an hour ago. Kuan, I know some painting methods. With my painting methods, I have drawn the 9th young master. The last sentence of this paragraph. After writing, Li Yunxin frowned and thought for a while, then slowly wrote the second sentence. It is also because of some of the experiences I had when drawing the 9th young master. This sentence was also said to Shinryu before. So I can sense Kuan's aura more keenly than ordinary people. And because of some of the experiences I had when drawing the 9th young master, I know why Kuan is looking for a method from me. The middle sentence of this paragraph. Then he fell into deep thought. In fact, he was replaying the scene an hour ago in his mind, not letting go of any details. In these 2 times, he added the same factor as the key point, drawing the 9th young master. The series of conjectures he came up with after that, including why did Shinryu need his technique, and how did his technique give Shinryu power, were all based on this conjecture. But in order to confirm a certain conjecture in his heart, he concealed this factor and secretly tested it. How did Shinryu react? Shinryu listened to him and said, "Let's not talk about how you came to these conclusions." This was, "Let's not talk about how you came up with these deductions." But it did make some sense. Now, supposing what you know to be true, how can you save your life? Was the first sentence of the passage. However, Li Yunxin had clearly explained how he came up with these deductions. To be clear, and twice, it was the experience of drawing the 9th young master. At this point, he realizes one thing. Mr. Dongting and the Dragon Princes have turned a deaf ear to the matter of possession and becoming a dragon. It was as if a person in his world whose corpus callosum had been cut off had turned a blind eye to what a certain eye could see. There was some strange power or law that caused them to do so. As for the true dragon, it seemed to have turned a deaf ear to the matter of drawing something. In order to verify this conjecture, he finally said the third sentence. It was also the third sentence he wrote on the paper. How about I draw a few male pets for fun like how I drew the 9th young master? When the conversation ended and it seemed that he had obtained Shinryu's approval, he said respectfully, "Just as I said before, sharing Shinryu's burden is also protecting my own life, so I dare not be careless." Then with the same expression, he used a completely different, obviously strange, and extremely frivolous tone to say the following sentence. How about I draw a few male pets for fun like how I drew the 9th young master? The risk of facing a master who was approaching the realm of Grand Supreme had paid off. This time, he was sure that Shinryu had turned a deaf ear to this sentence. Li Yunxin recorded these 3 sentences on a piece of paper. Then he used his hand to dig around on the reef and took out a stone. He used his finger to make a hole in the stone, then used his finger to cut a bottle stopper. Finally, he rolled up the piece of paper, stuffed it into the stone bottle, and threw it under the reef. After doing all this, he sat quietly on the reef, closed his eyes, and adjusted his breathing. It was afternoon. As time passed, his shadow slowly lengthened, An afternoon passed and night fell. A full moon rose. Between the sea and the sky, there were no other sounds except the sound of waves and birds. Li Yunqin sat motionlessly like a stone statue until the full moon set and the sun rose. But no one came. He slowly opened his eyes in the bright morning light and smiled happily. Chapter 644. When Li Yunqin found the ninth young master and the chicken spirit, another day had passed. Although the two of them had no way of finding him, the ninth young master was drawn by Li Yunqin after all. It was not a difficult task for him to find the ninth young master. He flew in the sky and quickly approached the chain of the East Sea. The chain of the East Sea was a chain of islands shaped like a crescent moon. There were people living in the central islands. The island there was larger in scale, and it was also a natural haven. The islands on both sides were small and sparse. They were far from each other and lacked fresh water. Hence there were few people. But in Li Yunqin's eyes, the islands on both sides were more beautiful. Naturally, he looked at them from the perspective of people from his previous world. Many of the islands had large stretches of white sand, jagged rocks, steep peaks, and dense vegetation. The surrounding seawater was clear and shallow. There were large patches of gorgeous corals at the bottom. If it was in his previous world, it would have been a summer resort and a vacation spot. But it was hard for people to even live now. They did not have time to think about it. It was a waste of the beautiful scenery. The ninth young master's aura was among the islands. Li Yunqin could sense it from afar. But when he lowered his altitude and followed the aura while shuttling through the islands to enjoy the beautiful scenery, he gradually realized that the aura was not right. The demonic aura was not limited to the ninth young master and the chicken spirit. There were two other strong demonic auras. One of them was even stronger than him, the Wei River Dragon King. Logically speaking, with his realm and a realm higher than his, he should be able to restrain his aura like a mortal. But he could sense the two auras from 100 miles away. It was obvious that they were released on purpose. His heart tightened slightly, but he already had some ideas. He activated his demonic aura and shot forward. After passing another 5 or 6 islands, he saw a jagged island in front of him. The island looked strange. Although there was a large expanse of flat sandy beach below, the mountains on the island were all towering like dark stone pillars, reaching straight into the sky. It was also a marvelous sight. According to the ninth young master's character, choosing this place to stay was within his expectations. He saw about 10 or so people. With his eyesight, if he wanted to, he could even see the strands of hair on the ninth young master's head clearly from this distance. However, the reason why it was approximately was because there were only 3 humanoid reapers left. The rest of the severed limbs were scattered on the beach, dyeing the seawater red. He could count 7 heads, but there were still some that were half broken. He didn't know if they were heads or not. The pheasant was fine. He stood there with a calm expression on his face. But Li Yunqin knew him. He saw that his arms were clasped tightly by his sides, and his fingers were straight. He knew that he was both frightened and frightened. Opposite the pheasant was an unfamiliar fiendish demon. But looking at his clothes and the clothes of the corpses on the ground, he should have come all the way here. These days, Li Yunqin destroyed many fiendish nests in the sea, and saw what the sea monsters looked like. These people were well dressed. They should be the people of the East Sea Dragon King. The person standing was dressed in a black tight suit with leather armor on the outside. He looked ordinary. The expression on his face was one of shock, anger, and fear. Although he was not as calm as the pheasant, the powerful aura he exuded was undoubtedly that of a great demon in the perfected being realm. This great demon in the perfected being realm was like the pheasant. He raised his head and looked at the person sitting on a dark stone pillar. A woman. A beautiful woman. A beautiful woman in red. There was a strong wind at this time. The woman's bright red clothes fluttered fiercely, like the flame on the top of the black stone pillar. She sat leaning against a protruding rock on the top of the stone pillar. She supported her cheek with one hand, revealing a jade-like white wrist from her fiery red sleeves. The other hand hung on her knee. Between her slender fingers, there was a long and thin gecko. But when he looked closely, he found that it was not a gecko. A green scale. Two horns, whiskers, sharp claws. This was a Basya, dragon son, Lord Tongtian, ninth young master Basya, who were at the peak of the perfected being realm, had now shown their true forms. They were being played around by the woman's fingers like toys. She lowered her eyes and looked lazy. Her hair was blown by the wind and swept past the corners of her mouth, making her look even more charming. She looked at the sea monster in the true realm, who was glaring at her on the beach, and released an amazing aura. That was the aura of a Grand Supreme. The woman sensed Li Yunxin's aura. She glanced at him but didn't say anything. It was just that her fingers unconsciously exerted a little more strength, and the little viper opened its mouth, as if it was in pain. But it couldn't scream. The sea monster and the chicken also turned their heads. Without waiting for the chicken to speak, the sea monster jumped 2 steps away, as if he finally found an excuse and didn't need to confront the woman's terrifying aura head-on. Wei River Lord, you said you were working with my Lord of the East Sea. What do you mean now? You asked your helper to kill many of my generals in the sea. Li Yunxin came on the clouds and slowly descended from the sky. He stopped when he was at the same level as the woman. He looked at her first, but she had already looked away. She was focused on playing with the little Basya in her hand, as if what happened here had nothing to do with her. She glanced at the pheasant and the severed limbs on the beach. Then she smiled. How should I address you, General? This demon general seemed to be someone who thought highly of himself in the past. If he had just met Li Yunxin, he wouldn't have been afraid of him. He had the Dragon King of the East Sea behind him. Just like a commoner with mediocre martial arts wouldn't be afraid of a top-tier master who was down and out. But now that there were corpses around him, he had no choice but to be afraid. Therefore his momentum was a little weaker. He raised his hand reluctantly. I am the General of 10 Directions under Lord of the East Sea. Li Yunxin raised his hand. Oh, General. Although I wasn't there just now, the 2 generals I left here are honest and don't like to make trouble. I'm afraid there was some misunderstanding just now. And you were injured by accident? The General of 10 Directions shouted. Misunderstanding? Honest and dutiful. Wei River Lord. Speaking of this, he was so angry that he couldn't catch his breath and was about to curse. But when he saw the woman on the stone pillar, he swallowed his words and gritted his teeth. Okay, Wei River Lord, I'll tell you again. My lord learned that you killed several lords of the sea in succession in the past few days. They were all under the protection of my Lord of the East Sea. So he sent me to ask you if you want to carry out the great plan that you mentioned before. If you want to, why are you so cruel? If you don't want to, ask me to ask your 2 generals to come back. But when I got here, I only said half of what I wanted to say. That Lord Tongtian. As he spoke, he quickly glanced at the woman's fingers, opened his mouth and ate. Pheasant shouted. Bullsh *T. It was you who spoke rudely first. The 9th young master has abstained from meat for 6 days. The General of 10 Directions roared. You, a little demon, have the right to speak? Shut up. Wei River Lord. How can I explain to my lord about what happened today? You have to give me an explanation. Li Yunxin suddenly pulled a long face. Just now he was still smiling amiably, but now he snorted coldly. Explanation? My people said it was your fault, so it's naturally your fault. What explanation do you want? The General of 10 Directions was stunned, and then became angry again. Your demon general ate. Everyone likes seafood. Li Yunxin grinned, showing his sharp fangs. I don't know how people on the sea are, but we people on the land like seafood. It's best to cultivate and reach the Tao. Marinate it with salt, sugar, wine, vinegar, onion, ginger, and coriander while it's still alive. It's best to eat it and make it scream. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the demon general. What's your real body? Tell me, let me see if you've eaten it. Seeing his eyes, the General of 10 Directions almost had goosebumps all over his body. But after all, he still had some arrogance in daily life. At this time he still stubbornly said, Wei River Lord, do you think that just because your cultivation is higher, you can? Li Yunxin stared at him. That's right. We, the great demons in the mysterious realm, can do whatever we want. For example, if I tear you up and eat you, and then make it into meat soup for your Lord Donghai, he will also eat it happily. Do you believe it or not? The sea demon widened his eyes, as if he didn't expect him to say such arrogant words. But before he could speak again, Li Yunxin sneered again. As for the helper, this one is not my helper. He slowly turned his head. The princess with the dragon soul of Dongting Lake, whose cultivation is close to the Grand Elder. If I can find such a helper, why do I need your Lord Donghai? You go back and tell this to your lord. If you miss a word, prepare your own sauce. When I go to Penglai Island again, you will be the one I want to eat. The general of 10 directions was dumbfounded and speechless. He could scold him again, but he didn't have the courage. Originally, he relied on his Lord Donghai, but now, according to the tone of this Li Yunxin, he even looked down on his lord. What's more, the so-called princess of Dongting Lake whose cultivation is close to the Grand Elder? He only knew that this woman was terrifyingly strong. When he just tied with the 9th young master, and was about to take him down with great effort, this woman suddenly appeared. With just a flick of her finger, she caught the 9th young master, and killed all his subordinates. But he didn't expect that she was so strong. What was her background? Although he was arrogant and rude, he was not a fool. Once he knew that this was not a good place for him to show off and bully people, he had the idea of retreating to save his life. He was flexible. He gritted his teeth and stared at her for a while. After a while, he clenched his fists and said stiffly, I'm rude and offended, Lord Wei. I'll go back and report to my lord. After saying this, he glared at the corpses on the beach and turned around to leave. He didn't expect that Lord Wei was such a jerk that he didn't stop. He shouted again lazily, You didn't offend me. You offended General Shanji under my command. Apologize to Brother Shanji first, and ask him if he wants you to leave. The general of 10 directions was so angry that it almost burst out of his skull. But he knew that maybe it was because this Lord Wei had the intention to kill him. He wanted to humiliate him like this, so that he would lose his temper and stay here too. But he had a mission. How could he be angry? He suddenly turned around and stared at the chicken spirit, gritting his teeth and saying, General, I'm sorry for offending you. Please forgive me. Shanji also learned from Li Yunxin and snorted coldly. Get out, coo, 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 coo. Get out. The general of 10 directions' eyes almost popped out. He looked at Li Yunxin again. But Li Yunxin was no longer looking at him, but at Red Lady. The sea monster carefully took a step back. No one stopped him. He took another 2 steps back. No one paid attention to him. He made up his mind and dived into the water. After swimming dozens of times, he finally knew that he had escaped. Let's not talk about this. When the sea monster had gone far away, Red Lady on the stone pillar turned her eyes to Li Yunxin and looked at him for a while. She noticed the red dot between his eyebrows. She stopped looking at him. She exerted more strength in her hand, making the little pit viper scream again and again, as if it was in pain again. I thought you came to the East Sea full of danger. Red Lady said softly and reached out to fix her hair. But you're still so powerful. It seems that you've gotten into some romantic debt again. But which family's girl has this kind of ability to win your favor and make you not afraid? Li Yunxin glanced at Shanji. The chicken spirit's mind was clear, and it trotted away. Then he walked forward for a while and landed on the stone pillar. He sighed softly. You left on Cloud Mountain. I thought you would hit me when you saw me again. Then he pointed to the spot between his eyebrows. It's not what you think. An elder gave me this thing, so that he could see if I had any bad thoughts. Are you here to avenge your father? Red Lady said lightly, but her eyes finally moved away from the red spot between his eyebrows. I want to find Shinryu, but I can't find him, so I came to the sea to ask. All the people I met along the way were untactful. A few days ago, I met a nest of them again, but they were all dead. I caught 2 of them and asked. She looked at Li Yunxin and smiled. Oh, it was done by Lord Wei Shuai. Yun Xian is still the same. Wherever she goes, there will be trouble. They said you also asked me about my father. Why? Do you feel guilty and want to do something for me now? Li Yunxin opened his mouth. Red Lady stopped smiling. The elder you mentioned is Shinryu, right? Where is she? Li Yunxin said again, she. Red Lady shook her head. Oh, you are working for Lord Shinryu now. No wonder. You are dragon son. Then do you want to catch me and send me to your Lord God? After saying this, she suddenly raised her arm. The light and soft fabric was blown up by the wind, revealing her snow-white arm. Well, if you catch me, I will do whatever you want. She looked at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin also looked at her. After a while, he slowly stretched out his hand and carefully took out the little boa venomous from her fingers. He threw it under the stone pillar. A green light flashed in midair, and the 9th young master returned to his human form. However, his handsome face and his exposed hands were already covered in bruises. He shouted angrily, "Salted fishly, just you wait." However, he was not as tough as his words. He looked around and ran in the direction where Pheasant went. Li Yunxin sighed again. "Little fish, it is not what you think. But I can't say it. But I advise you. You should go. You are not a match for Shinryu. The East Sea is too dangerous now." Chapter 645. Red Lady slowly puts down her hand and turns her face away. The strong wind blows her black hair on her face, which reminds Li Yunxin of the scene in Dongting. She was sitting on the railing and drinking in the wooden pavilion at the foot of Mount June. He says again, "Your father may not be dead." After saying this, he watches Red Lady's reaction. The fish monster seems to calm down a little, but she is still silent. No one knows what she is thinking. After a while, she raises her hand and brushes the long hair on her forehead with her ring finger. She also turns to look at him. "I have asked a lot of people these days. I also guess so. Do you have any wine?" Li Yunxin breathes a sigh of relief. "It's good that you think so. In fact, I'm guessing that someone is trying to shift the blame onto the Divine Lord, so that there will be a fight in Donghai." Red Lady interrupts him. "Oh, you say I am a trouble. Didn't Yunxin say before that for a woman, being a trouble is also a very high evaluation?" Li Yunxin is stunned. "Well, I'm not talking about you. I mean, the situation is very complicated. King Rock, Dragon Sun, the Freemasons, and Mu Nanju may all do these things. I have been involved involuntarily, but you can still get away. Do you have any wine?" Red Madam interrupted him once again. She suddenly smiled. "Yin Xian also has such a hurried time. Is she anxious for me? Or is she anxious for your immortal lord? Ah, I am 500 years old. Immortal lord is 2,000 years old. You are only a teenager. In fact, it doesn't make much difference for you." Li Yunxin frowns and coughs. "Xiaoyu, what are you talking about? It's not what you think. This thing on my head. The glabella is the upper dantian, the hidden heart residence." Red Lady says with a smile. "I think this thing is like an earring. It is condensed with essence blood. The thing on the ear is hidden in your heart residence. Don't you remember the warning in your heart?" After saying this, she reaches into her sleeve and asks Li Yunxin for wine, but he ignores her. She takes out a small jar for herself. On the small black porcelain jar, there was a festive red paper with Rakshasa script on it. She patted the opening, clutched it with her hand, and leaned back against the stone. She took a sip like those unrestrained heroines of the Jianghu, and looked at Li Yunxin with half-closed eyes. "So the Divine Lord is Yin Xian's new lover?" Li Yunxin put his hands behind his back and exhaled heavily. "You're drunk. Talk nonsense. What are you doing here?" Red Lady did not answer him. With a smile on her face, she sipped on her wine while sizing him up. When Li Yunxin frowned slightly, he said softly, "There are many things to do. You'll find out sooner or later. But you lied to me on Yunshan, didn't you?" As she spoke, a wooden box appeared in her hand. He tossed it to Li Yunxin. "When we were in Yunshan, you told me that this was a treasure. But in fact, the token you took away is the real treasure. Why don't you take a look at what's inside?" Li Yunxin took it. Looking at Red Lady, he slowly opened the box. The wooden box had something in common with the Huangyu Sutian painting. It didn't have any special spiritual power, and it looked like an ordinary object. That day in the Kuan Hall of Yunshan, he also wondered if there would be any mystery hidden in this thing. But in that situation, it was not easy to take away one or two, so he could only take what he liked. There was dragon energy on the token. He had a vague idea in his mind, so he focused his attention on the token. But what Red Lady said was also half right and half wrong. It was true that he had tricked her into thinking that the wooden box was the most precious treasure. But the token and the scale fragment of the true dragon that he had obtained were not some kind of treasure that would allow him to rule over all the demons. That thing. Actually, Li Yunxin still didn't know what it was. After opening the box, there was a roll of paper inside. Many of the rolls were folded together, and there were even folds. This meant that the paper was also ordinary paper in the mortal world. It was not even as invulnerable as the paper used in the Huangyu Sutian painting. Seeing this, Li Yunxin was really curious. He peeled off the outermost one and picked it up to take a look. Beautiful running script. Golden threads and silver hooks, thin and hard. The first few sentences were, "Those who have not seen the garden for many years, Donglin Yusong. Now the spring scenery is annoying. The light cold is not over yet. 10 miles are filled with dust, unable to sleep. Tossing and turning, the beauty is still there. Fate made in heaven, meeting by chance. It's a letter. It's the letter that Su Yusong wrote to Zhuomuja back then. Or rather, it was a love letter that was extremely bold in words." Li Yunxin was slightly taken aback. He took another look at Red Lady and peeled off a few more pieces. In the end, they were all love letters. It should be the letters that Su Yusong and Zhuomuja exchanged when they were still low-level cultivators. The man pursued passionately, while the woman was reserved. The man intensified his attacks, and the woman finally fell in love. Then, the two fell in love until they became Tao companions. This thing was preserved. After the two sages were possessed, the two wandering souls of the Freemasonry were not destroyed. Instead, they were preserved as treasures. Li Yunxin did not expect that there was such a thing in the box. He opened his mouth. That Su Sheng of yours? Red Lady said with drunken eyes. I chased him to the Takaro. Later, after asking for a long time, I found out that there was really nothing special in these things, so I told him to leave. Now he should be looking for that Lu Ling, at the foot of Cloud Mountain. Lu Ling was seriously injured. The fake sage Zhuomuja said that he wanted to refine Lu Ling into their child, so he kept her. Later, the two fake sages first met by Yunxin, who had returned to her peak, at the foot of the mountain, and then met Red Lady. Before Su Yusong destroyed his obsession, he followed Red Lady's instructions, and threw all the treasures on his body to the ground. After that, the situation was extremely chaotic, and no one had the time to pay attention. Li Yunxin asked the 9th young master to pick up the translucent jade scroll and send it to Cloud Mountain. He did not know what happened to the rest of the treasures. The physical bodies of Lu Ling and Xian Shilio, which were sealed, were among them, and their whereabouts were unknown. He did not know if they were destroyed in the end, or if they escaped. He also did not know if Su Sheng would be able to find them. Thinking of this, Li Yunxin could not help but sigh. The cultivation method of Xianmen was also ironic. When they entered the sect, they paid particular attention to the abandonment of emotions. Along the way to the sage realm, they should have all forgotten their emotions. In the end, the three sages, the former sword Saint Yu Meng only wanted to live a simple life, with his Wu Suli. But it was also a good thing to live a simple life. The situation at that time was also chaotic, and the sheriff was still with him. But at that time, Li Yunxin left Little Rock Canyon and broke into Hatred's lair alone. No one in the city should be watching them, and they could all safely escape. Then there was Su Yusong and Zhuomuja. The reincarnated bodies originally wanted to do something. Who knew that the current world was not the same as their previous world? The reincarnated sages did not obtain any benefits, and instead ended up in a difficult situation. Now they had to abandon their emotionlessness and abandon their desires, and walk the same path as Yu Meng. The three sages all went from being emotionless to emotionless, and now they had to find their emotions again. Li Yunxin put the letter back and closed the box. Red Lady waved her hand and kept it. This is mine, she said. Li Yunxin sighed softly. The token that I obtained isn't a supreme treasure either. I used it. I used it on little Jiu. His body is now drawn by me. Red Lady glanced to the west. I wanted to make that token just now. You drew it well, but I can't make it. Sigh. Forget it. I didn't come for the token anyway. Li Yunxin blinked. Then you want? Red Lady raised her head and drank a mouthful of wine. She drank in a hurry, and the wine spilled from the corner of her mouth. She wiped it casually, stood up, and turned to look to the east. When he first met her, she was like a spoiled princess, but her personality was pure and lively, and she was deeply affectionate. Later, she became a sad and infatuated person, muddle-headed all day, and there was nothing likable about her personality. She had to sacrifice for many people, but that sacrifice was not moving. Later, she died again and merged with the dragon soul. She retained her memories of the past, but her personality changed greatly. Now she stood on the rock facing the wind, her flame-like red clothes fluttering, and her heroic spirit flourishing. How was she like before? She looked at the distant East Sea, slightly narrowed her eyes, and casually threw the wine bottle down. Her voice became cold. I had a dream in the West. In the dream, a deity said that you were in trouble, and asked me to help you. I thought, why should I help you? Oh, so I also came to the East Sea to investigate my father. You are Dragon's son, and there is actually a Dragon King in the East Sea. With your personality, you will not stop until you kill them all. That is really wonderful. The corner of Red Lady's mouth curled up. When I just arrived at the sea, there was a Dragon King of the West Sea who disrespected me. I killed him along the way. He was skinned and pulled out, but he became a treasure. She turned her hand, and a piece of red silk appeared in her palm, dancing wildly in the wind. It seemed to have a life of its own, extremely unwilling to be held in the palm of Red Lady, and tried to break free. But how could it break free from the power of a grand supreme powerhouse? It emitted an angry aura. However, at this moment, Red Lady also emitted a violent pressure. Li Yunxin had never submitted to anyone in his life. He could even talk and laugh in front of Shinryu. But now that he suddenly felt Li Xianyu's aura, his heart skipped a beat, and he almost subconsciously dodged. He heard Red Lady say, right now, those who don't know what's good for them should have followed me. Yunxin, are you going to help me, or are you going to watch? Without waiting for Li Yunxin to answer, this female monster shouted sternly, come out! Just now when she showed her aura, Li Yunxin was shocked. Now that he heard this shout, he was shocked once more. He boasted that his cultivation was at the profound realm, and his senses were already extremely sharp. But at this time, he actually didn't notice anything. As soon as Red Lady's voice fell, on the eastern side of the sea, a white wave suddenly appeared that connected to the sky. On the top of that wave, there were countless demons and giant beasts. Looking from afar, it looked like a forest sprang up on the sea. Then the war drums sounded, rolling over like muffled thunder. Li Yunxin had seen the situation of tens of thousands of demons attacking cultivators in the heaven swamp of the Yi country. But compared to this, those demons were like a motley crew. These demons on the sea had clear flags and bright armors. Even from such a long distance, they could see the square formation. Perhaps even the army of mortals in the secular world didn't look like this. If he had to say, it was because the strengths of the land demons and cultivators were gathered together. That was why there was such a terrible momentum. Red Lady said that they followed a little. What kind of a little was this? As soon as these pursuers appeared, they saw a demon shooting straight at them like an arrow leaving the bow. It stopped 3 meters away from the two of them, and didn't come any closer. At such a distance, mortals couldn't see anything. But the sky was clear, and the air was clear on the sea. Li Yunxin used his demon power, so he could see the appearance of the newcomer clearly. It was the General of 10 Directions, under the command of Lord Donghai, who had left not long ago. The General of 10 Directions stopped, took out something that looked like a conch, and put it in his mouth. Instead of speaking, he laughed for a while. Ha 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 ha. I thought you had a great background, but it turns out that you are the public enemy of our sea. Let's see where you can run to today. Li Yunxin turned to look at Red Lady and sighed. Look at you. I have to help you even if I don't want to. Why did such a large group of demons come? The story began when the General of 10 Directions fled the small island in panic. This sea demon's true form was actually a conch. Because it looked like a parrot's mouth, it was called a nautilus. Since it was a conch, it had a hard shell. After it opened its apertures and gained intelligence, it wandered in the sea and made some friends. The closest friend was a hawksbill turtle. This hawksbill turtle lived for 800 years and had friends all over the East Sea and West Sea. After absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, it reached the emptiness realm and transformed into a human form. Then, it asked its friends to find a job under the command of the Dragon King of the West Sea. It was in charge of the security of the Shell clan in a deep strait, a rift valley, and a water cave in the West Sea. This job lasted for another 800 years. The hawksbill turtle was not good at currying favor, but the nautilus turtle was smart. Seeing that the hawksbill turtle had made a name for himself, he learned from it and found a job under the Dragon King of the East Sea. The hawksbill turtle did that job for 800 years while he was promoted step by step. First he was a laborer, then a soldier. He was promoted to a sergeant, then a sergeant. Then he was promoted to the patrolling commandant, the water-repelling general, the rising wave general, and now, the general of 10 directions. Although he made a name for himself, he did not forget his old friends. In the past, although he had many friends who had gained intelligence as time passed, many of them had died. In the sea, there was no one. Opening one's apertures did not mean that life would be easier. Instead, it would be more difficult. When one was muddle-headed, it was delicious to eat any mud or rotten meat. However, after opening one's apertures and gaining intelligence, how could one still eat? Once one had emotions, how could one submit to adversity? On the contrary, it was easier for one to die. Therefore, these two people had a lot of contact with each other. Today was a coincidence. The general of 10 directions fled in panic and finally reached the surface of the sea. However, he saw a majestic army of the Sea Clan in the water from afar. He was the great general of 10 directions, under the command of the East Sea Lord. He could face the East Sea Lord during meetings. It could be said that he and the East Sea Lord were bound together for good or bad. Now that he saw these people in the territory of the East Sea, he naturally had to ask them. However, when he got closer, he saw his old friend, the hawksbill turtle. His face was full of sorrow, but there was also 70% anger. When he asked, he found out that it was a group of mourning soldiers. His master, the Dragon King of the West Sea, was killed. Chapter 646. The Commander-in-Chief of 10 Directions was astonished. The Dragon King of West Ocean was not someone he could fathom. His strength had far exceeded his understanding, and he could be said to be on par with Lord Donghai. But now, the hawksbill turtle had used the word slaughter. What kind of slaughter? The old tortoise was really sad, so he told him everything in detail. The East Sea was located in the east of the Midland, and so was the West Sea. The East Sea and the West Sea were not separated by the South Sea. Instead, they were right next to each other. In fact, the East Sea and the West Sea combined probably didn't cover all of the waters in the east of the Midland. Among the 9 sons of the true dragon, there were the East Sea, the West Sea, the South Sea, the North Sea, the East Sea, the West Sea, the West Sea, the North Sea, the West 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 Sea. The rest of the sea borders were actually mostly ownerless. Nevertheless, the territory of the 9 seas was much larger than that of Midland. The East Ocean Dragon King's Dragon Palace was in Penglai, while the West Ocean Dragon King's Dragon Palace was in Yingzhou. These 2 Dragon King territories were next to each other, so their temperaments were quite similar. On this day, the Dragon King of the Western Sea was in high spirits. He brought along his 2 attendants and toured his territory alone. As a result, he ran into a beautiful woman in red. This woman had just gotten rid of a big demon, who gave the Dragon King of West Ocean a headache, as well as the demon soldiers and demon generals in his lair. She was washing herself in the water. According to the demon soldiers who were lucky enough to escape with their lives, the woman was washing and bathing at that time. Her figure was beautiful and graceful. The Dragon King of West Ocean had never seen such a peerless beauty. He giggled and looked on, then flirtatiously teased her a few times. Then he was killed. The skin was skinned, and the tendons were pulled out. The mighty Dragon King of the seas. He was just teasing her. It wasn't as if he was bullying her. Did he deserve to die? It was one thing to kill them, but they actually skinned them, pulled out their tendons, and even sealed their souls. How savage. When the tortoise said this, tears flowed down its face, and it was difficult to calm its grief and indignation. Also, there were more than just people from the West Ocean in the Navy. There were also Nan Hai, Bai Hai, Chu Liao Hai, Hao Han Hai, Chi Chuan Hai, and other generals and soldiers under Dragon King's command. The Dragon King was fine, but the demoness who had harmed the West Sea Army had also been hit in those places. Wherever he went, blood flowed like a river. He would start a massacre at the slightest disagreement, not sparing anyone who had eaten the Lord Dongting. But who really ate Lord Dongting? There are always people who say that the Lord Dongting ate the Lord Dongting. But who is the Lord Dongting? These people chased the demoness all the way to the East Sea. This time he was going to see the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, to ask him to preside over the overall situation, to invite the 8-dragon son to discuss the matter, and to eliminate the demoness before she leaps back to the mainland. He also happened to meet this general of 10 directions. Hearing what the old turtle said, he immediately thought of the woman beside the Lord of Wei River. He said that she was the princess of Dongting, Lord Dongting, and he was right. He told them the whole story, and the army charged towards them in a grandiose manner. The sea was not like the land. There were no mountains or valleys to block them. Even if there were demons at the bottom of the sea, they could come and go freely in the water. Without the restriction of the stinky Taoists of the Xianmen, they were not afraid of being suppressed by others if they were too powerful. It was a real world of demons. Therefore, the army of the Dragon King was strong, and it could really be called the strongest army in the world. At the front of the army, there were some vanguards with hard shells and special supernatural powers. This vanguard was not a sharp blade but a strong shield. Many soldiers and demons cooperated with each other to first resist the fierce blow of the big demon. After that, the various marine tribes showed their abilities. When they really fought, all kinds of supernatural powers and spells were released, but they cooperated well. When the enemy was in a dilemma, they could only use 10% of their power, even if they had great abilities. Demons had practiced these tactics many times in actual combat, so they were not out of practice. Although they had never met a strong enemy like Red Lady, they didn't feel it was strange. The territory of the sea was vast, and there were many marine tribes. Naturally, there were also many demons. There were many arrogant monster kings in the core areas of the Dragon Island, such as Peng Lai, Yingzhou, and Fang Hu, not to mention other places. The soldiers under the command of the Dragon King in the sea were on expeditions, but they were completely different from the armies of the human countries on the land, who had not experienced war for a long time. They were also different from the Xianmen and demons, who relied on supernatural powers, and the general trend to dominate the weak human beings. These guys should be the closest to the definition of army in Li Yunxin's world. Red Lady might not be able to see the difference between them and the demons and cultivators on the land, but Li Yunxin could see it. Originally, he was the weak one who defeated the strong one. At this time, he knew that perhaps Red Lady could easily kill any one of them, but it would be difficult for her to fight against these well-trained Navy soldiers in a battle formation. Therefore, after sighing and making a promise, he coughed again. But although I want to help you, little you are, I think it's better for us to avoid the spearhead. I think these guys are not like the motley crew on the land. No matter how strong the martial arts experts are, they shouldn't fight against an organized army head-on. When he said this, Red Lady frowned and looked at him. Just as she was about to say something, she saw the enemy's army pressing closer. Among them, someone shouted again. This kind of thing was called scolding. No one knew where this bad habit came from, but it was bound to irritate people. The one among the demons might have gone to the land for further training, as he scolded very well. At first, he didn't use any vulgar words, but every word made people seethe with anger. Some of the demons understood and laughed and cheered. Some didn't understand, but because of the atmosphere, they were also noisy. Red Lady frowned again and looked at Li Yunxin. This is not the person I used to know. After hearing these words, do you still want to avoid the spearhead? Li Yunxin turned a deaf ear to the scolding and said calmly, what you said before is right. I want to plot against the Dragon King on the sea, but it's not enough to kill all of them. They will die sooner or later, but how they die also has to be paid attention to. The layout and planning must start from the details. Every step must be carefully designed. It's okay to kill some small people, but the key people must die at the key point, otherwise, there will be trouble in the future. Now, the one who shouted seemed to be tired of scolding and changed to another person. These demons should also be afraid of the power of Red Lady, so they wanted to make them angry and make them attack first to find out the truth. Therefore, the next person's scolding was even more unpleasant. However, there was no change in Li Yunxin's face when he heard such words. Red Lady, who frowned more and became more and more impatient, said earnestly, I originally planned to use the hands of the Lord of the East Sea to gather them all. Borrow their strength to fight. The 9 Dragon Kings can't be harmonious. There must be discord. In the past, there should be a subtle calm. But the whirlpools and undercurrents are still there. I understand these whirlpools and undercurrents. As long as I provoke them a little, they may fight fiercely. Isn't it much easier than fighting in person? We don't have to dirty our hands. And we can still watch the show. But if at this time, such as now, you rush over, kill one, kill two, or cause someone to suffer a great loss of strength, that delicate balance may be destroyed. Once the balance is broken, it will be difficult or even impossible to make them move again. For example, if the Dragon King of the West Sea dies, the Dragon King of the North Sea, and the Dragon King of the South Sea will also be greatly weakened. Then the first thing that the rest of the Dragon Sun may think is that they can take over these territories because it is profitable. So they want you and me to continue fighting, and then they can sit back and reap the benefits. This is the trap that we have set for ourselves. At this point, the second person seemed to be tired of scolding. The demons in the array should be a little surprised. According to the people of the West Sea, the female monster in red was cruel and would attack at the slightest disagreement. And according to the general of the East Sea, the Lord of the Wei River from the land was also not a good-tempered person. He was petty and sinister. But now these two were actually able to keep their composure. It was also strange. They didn't know that it was all Li Yunxin's credit on this stone pillar now. No matter who told Red Lady to come to the East Sea, and no matter whether she was here to help him or not, it was not a good idea to kill her now. Her realm was close to the Grand Supreme Realm, but Li Yunxin was only at the Xian realm. In this kind of array, it would be painful and troublesome if he was accidentally injured. If he was unlucky and was really captured, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to escape. It was not his style to fight head-on. Many times, doing this was also part of a strategy to overcome 1,000 caddies with little effort. He moved her with emotion and reason, and Red Lady was not a stupid person. Although it was the third person who shouted and scolded even more harshly, her brows gradually relaxed. She sized up Li Yunxin again and sighed softly. Sigh. You always have a reason. You said so much, so we really have to escape? Li Yunxin also heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. It's good that you can listen to me. It's unwise to act impulsively because of a moment of anger. But at this moment he heard General Shifeng shout. Isn't that so? I just remembered that his old mother is still in the hands of our Lord of the East Sea, and has been conferred the title of Madame Mingyue. Our Lord always calls us brothers. Then wouldn't I be his uncle? It turned out that the sea race and the Lu Ke had something in common when they scolded. They both liked to make an issue out of seniority and blood relations. This was the third person's unrestrained mouth cursing to this point. General Shifeng was waiting for Li Yunxin to come over and suffer a loss, but he found that he was even more patient than the old turtle, and didn't make a sound. After hearing the words of the third person, he remembered that Lord of the East Sea had mentioned that this Lord of the Wei River was the son of Madame Mingyue. He was quick-witted and shouted out, When Li Yunxin heard this, he paused. Then he repeated what he had just said to Red Lady. It's unwise to act impulsively. He stopped, and was silent for a while. Then he looked up at Red Lady. I want him to die. Li Xinyu was stunned and blinked his eyes. Ha! Li Yunxin turned around and stared at General Shifeng viciously from a distance. I want him to die now. I want his corpse to be whole. I want him to die miserably. The ninth young master said that he would die miserably. I can save the vinegar. Red Lady blinked her eyes again and laughed. Oh, it turns out that Yunxin was just joking. Since Yunxin wants him to die. Her face turned cold. Of course he won't live to see tomorrow. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a sudden loud buzz between the sea and the sky. A layer of brilliant light shield, as if it was fiercely pressed down from the sky by a god, sealed this incomparably vast sea area. The blue sky disappeared in the blink of an eye. Through the restriction, the sky turned pale gold. The waves on the sea also disappeared, as if the whole sea had become solid like glass because of Red Lady's words. But Li Yunxin immediately realized that it was not as if. The sea had indeed solidified. The navy in the distance was originally on the top of the waves. The members of the sea race loved water. Even if they became human beings and had magical powers, they still liked to have some parts of their bodies immersed in the water. Because most of their natural magical powers used water as a medium, they could get twice the result with half the effort when fighting. The waves were originally white as well. There were broken waves like snow, but after Red Lady said this and sealed the whole sea area, the snow-white waves suddenly turned pink. Not because of anything else, but because the seawater had indeed become solid as hard as gold and iron. The sea demons that were half submerged in the water and had low cultivation levels were instantly sliced in half by the terrifying seawater. The lower half of their bodies seemed to be sealed in amber, while the upper half of their bodies spurted out a lot of blood. Those with high cultivation didn't die, but they couldn't break free, and could only turn pale with fright. No matter how high their cultivation was, they could still break the shackles. But the seawater had become extremely hard and brittle. Once it was broken by a huge force, the power was no less than that of the fragmentation mines in Li Yunxin's world. A large number of small demons, who could have been saved, were immediately smashed into pieces and died. The demons had originally carefully set up the array, but they didn't expect that the female demon would use such a method. Su Yusong, the fake saint, once told Li Yunxin that the magical powers below the mysterious realm were all using the rules and the great Tao of heaven and earth. But once they entered the mysterious realm, they might have the ability to change the rules and even create the rules of heaven and earth. Red Lady, whose realm was close to the Grand Supreme after the fusion of the dragon soul, undoubtedly had this ability now. With this magical power, the demon navy in the distance lost nearly 10% of its members. Furthermore, he had sealed off this part of the sea. Was he planning to not leave himself, or not let these demons leave? But the water demons had been on the battlefield for a long time, and they weren't as scattered as the demons on the land. In the face of such a shocking change, the formation didn't fall into disorder, and the demons in the mysterious realm also used their magical powers to protect themselves and their subordinates. At the same time, they cooperated with each other and slowly dissolved the power of the seal. After only 2 seconds, the waves on which the demon navy was standing became alive again, and the blood splashed into the sea and was washed underwater. But at this moment Li Yunxin roared, turned into a lightning bolt, and shot straight at them. In midair, he turned into a terrifying 100-meter-long dragon. Today I'll kill you first, and then I'll give you that so-called Lord of East Sea. Chapter 647. When Li Yunxin fought on land, he had shown his true form several times. But at that time, even Dragon Sun was a demon in the eyes of the cultivators of the Xianmen sect, just a slightly more noble demon. The legend of the immortals controlling and eating dragons was also widely spread in the human world. It could be seen that in the hearts of the cultivators, Dragon Sun was nothing special. However, on the sea, once Li Yunxin's Chuan true form appeared, golden horn, long beard, white mane, black armor, the restriction that Red Lady set up was originally emitting a faint golden light. now that his dragon body was hovering in the sky. The black scales that were already glowing with a faint golden light were even more dazzling. As the saying goes, the clouds follow the dragons, and the wind follows the tigers. Large patches of dense clouds gathered around him. In the blink of an eye, because of the extreme anger of this mysterious realm dragon son, the clouds and mist kept exploding with continuous muffled thunder. White and purple electric snakes swam in the clouds and mist, between the faintly visible scales. Wei River had only appeared for 3 or 4 breaths, but his terrifying momentum had already shocked the army, as if he was the only Shinryu race between the sea and the sky. At this moment, the allied army of demons and monsters was really in an uproar. Just now when Red Lady froze the sea and sealed the sky, these demons only panicked for a moment, and then they recovered their neat formation and gave orders. However, now seeing the dragon body of Wei River, many people were really stunned. It was not because of how big Li Yunxin's Chiwen Shinryu was. There were demons in the sea that showed their true forms, and there were even bigger ones. But because, just as Lu Baishui said, the Dragon King on the sea called themselves Shinryu Kings. They said that those on land were just fake dragons with impure bloodlines, and that they were not worthy of being Shinryu. However, just as Li Yunxin said, these Dragon King on the sea were all sealed by Shinryu and the spiritual energy between the sea and the sky. No matter how thin the Dragon Son's bloodline was, there was still a dragon soul in it. But the Dragon Son on the sea didn't have that. All he had was the spiritual chi between heaven and earth, and a name. They should have had true bodies, but now their true bodies didn't have a concrete appearance. How could they let people see the majestic appearance of the dragons on normal days? These marine tribes, for many years, apart from a few lucky ones who had witnessed the true form of the Shinryu, who had exaggerated and spread the story, today was indeed the first time they had seen the Shinryu tribe. But didn't they say that the Dragon Son's bloodline wasn't pure? Why was his aura, and appearance so similar to Shinryu? While they were in a daze, the 1,000-feet-long dragon had already arrived at lightning speed, straight toward the East Sea General of 10 directions in front of the formation. The general, too, was startled and astonished, and almost felt that there was something wrong with his eyes, that he had seen something he should not have seen. By the time he came back to his senses, Li Yunxin's angry roar had already reached him with a terrifying demonic power, and it was mixed with some skillful power from the Xianmen sect. Although the monster and demon armies looked out for each other and formed formations, however, this general of the 10 directions had come halfway through the journey and did not belong to anyone, so no one paid attention to him. When he saw a series of thunderbolts, clouds, and airwaves exploding in the sky in front of him, and saw the frozen surface of the sea exploding into clouds of mist due to the impact of the dragon's body, he knew he had to dodge quickly. His profound realm dragon son was truly terrifying. But how could the formations and restrictions in front of him allow people to easily enter? He mobilized his demonic power and tried to integrate it into the flow of the army, but he was immediately pushed out. In just a short while, Li Yunxin's terrifying roar had already arrived, and the general of the 10 directions had no choice but to use his supernatural power to protect himself. Rumble! Rumble! Before the person arrived, the sound arrived first. It first blasted the restriction defense of the vanguard formation. The powerful force was diverted in all directions, and the mystic light bloomed like a silk chrysanthemum. The dissipated force affected the restriction that the general of the 10 directions had set up himself. It only lasted for a breath's time, and the true realm monster and demon immediately bled from his mouth and nose, and he was blasted away several feet diagonally. It was also the old tortoise who remembered their past friendship and jumped out of the formation, relying on the help of his comrades, and caught the general of the 10 directions. Once he was pulled back into the formation, the general of the 10 directions finally recovered. At this moment, he no longer had the arrogance he had when he cursed just now. He only wished that he had forgotten to have this tongue when he attained Tao, so he could not say those death-seeking words just now. He had seen the mystic realm demon kings in the sea, but this Wei River Lord's mystic realm was strange. How could he be so powerful? He took a deep breath, and the 1,000-foot-long dragon body in the air had already come crashing down with wind and lightning. However, as the saying went, the commander of the 3 armies could be snatched away, but an ordinary man could not. Although the general of the 10 directions was considered an outsider, this was the East Sea after all. Furthermore, he was the one who had angered Li Yunxin, and this visitor from the land had singled him out to be killed. If he were to be killed in front of so many fiendish demon troops, how would he have any face or morale left? The great fiendish demons in the formation recovered from the shock of the sudden appearance of Long Sun's true body, and realized this. They immediately ordered the 3 armies to protect the general of the 10 directions. However, it was an alliance of many factions, and there were nearly 10,000 of them. It was not easy to pass down military orders. By the time they arrived at the small formation where the old tortoise was, Li Yunxin's dragon body had already arrived. When the great demons behind the formation saw this scene, 3 mystic realm demons immediately shouted, "What an arrogant fellow who overestimates himself! Charging into our formation single-handedly, leave your life behind!" Bright lights burst out. It was unknown what kind of divine power they cast. It was unknown how many people cast their divine powers. The general of the 10 directions, who was in a sorry state like a stray dog, was immediately enveloped by layers of mystic light restrictions. In front of the small formation he was in, he could no longer see the figure behind the formation. Many members of the Sea Clan, and several mystic realm great demons protected him firmly. They were waiting for the appearance of Wei River Dragon King, who had instantly stolen the morale of the 3 armies, to suffer a setback, so that the general of the 10 directions could be killed. They used such a method in an instant. Long Sun, who was in the mystic realm of Shi, could not withstand this attack. Even if Red Lady attacked with all her strength, she might not be able to break this attack. This was like the cliché story. A demon was a chopstick that could be broken easily, but when hundreds and thousands of demons gathered in one place, they couldn't be broken easily. However, as soon as the great demons finished speaking, they heard Li Yunxin laughing and shouting in the thunderclouds. "You think you are great because you have more people. Do you want to compete with me in numbers or restrictions? Give me, break." At this moment, even the sea demons with the strongest cultivation strength, and the most powerful divine power, couldn't immediately see what method Lord Wei River had used. They only knew that after he shouted, countless demon soldiers suddenly poured down from the thunderclouds like a heavy rain. Those demon soldiers looked strange. Their bodies, arms, and hands and feet were all thin lines. But they could move freely, and each of them was fierce and unafraid of death. They also had extremely high spiritual intelligence. As soon as they appeared, it was as if tens of thousands of beehives were poked and exploded at the same time. They couldn't hear clearly what they were saying, but they could hear all kinds of curses. Just the sound alone was enough to give the demons with lower cultivation strength a splitting headache. These small soldiers poured down like a heavy rain. Although there were many of them, they were not as many as the sea demon soldiers in front of the formation. Their cultivation strength was also impressive, but there were also many sea demon soldiers with higher cultivation strength. But the worst thing was, that wasn't all. Following closely behind these demon soldiers were thousands of strange beasts that fell onto the battle formation. Where were the strange beasts from? They were the strange beasts in the Octuple Treasure's ancient scroll that Art Saint Chen Zhao got from Cloud Mountain. In the Yi Kingdom, the golden horned centipede, the mount that Guqin Jun and Lord Tongtian rode on, was one of the beasts in the painting. Its muscles were as hard as steel, and ordinary demons in the transcendent realm couldn't get close to it. It wasn't afraid when it encountered a demon in the true realm. The mermaid that raped and killed Xiesheng's body on the Taowu was also one of the beasts in the painting. Killing someone like Xiesheng was like killing a baby. It showed how brutal and powerful the strange beasts in the painting were. These strange beasts were wild and hard to tame. Although they all had terrifying power, most of them had low spiritual intelligence. If they were released in front of the 2 armies, not to mention killing the enemies, they would probably fight each other, which would mess up their own formation. But just now, Li Yunxin had revealed her 1,000-foot-long dragon body, and her voice had stolen the people's attention. The demons were really stunned. Then, he got close to the front of the demons with a thunderous momentum. With Red Lady's seal, the water in the sea was suppressed, and many of the strange beasts didn't know how to swim. Who could stop these hundreds and thousands of violent beasts from the top of the demon soldiers' heads? People said that he came alone, but who would have thought that this guy had countless treasures in Cloud Mountain, and was the leader of an entire army by himself? In an instant, the demon formation was filled with broken limbs and blood splattered everywhere. It was as if a curtain of rain had been poured down. Humans had their own abilities and beasts had their own supernatural powers. Perhaps Li Yunxin and Red Lady couldn't break the restriction created by these demons in a short time. But among those strange beasts, how many of them were born with restrictions and magical powers as food? And how many of them had unimaginable crooked abilities? He didn't know where the impregnable barrier had been broken from. No one knew which army was the first to be eaten. They only knew that, in less than 3 or 4 breaths of time, hundreds of demon soldiers had died in the mouths of the strange beasts. Those terrifying and cruel beasts were like flowers blooming in the sea demon formation, madly running in all directions. The army of nearly 10,000 people was extremely vast. One side couldn't see the other side, and the other side couldn't hear what was going on. The demon soldiers and demon beasts that Li Yunxin sent out bloomed on this side, but they didn't know what was going on the other side. From a distance, the place where the Wei River Dragon King was supposed to be repulsed suddenly burst out with blood-curdling screams. It was as if an army had charged into the formation, but they didn't have to guess for too long. The strange beasts would arrive soon. Chapter 648. They were supposed to be running around in all directions. However, the little figures that Li Yunxin obtained from the secret path of the Shaoyan Mountain blocked the way of those strange beasts according to his will. In the end, these fools, who were in a killing frenzy, went straight into the enemy's formation instead of killing each other. If it was the army formed by the demons on the land, it would have collapsed by this time. However, these sea monsters had some strategy in managing their army. Faced with this sudden change, while paying a heavy price and discarding many corpses, they gradually retreated and formed a strong formation again. Before, the strange beasts could easily tear an opening with their magical powers. But now the opening was getting bigger and bigger, and the ferocious beasts were also scattered. Without the supernatural abilities of the swarm of bees, and their spiritual wisdom was far less powerful than that of the demon race in the sea. They were just ferocious beasts. It was impossible to kill all of them for the time being. But it was not difficult to stabilize the formation and not pay any more casualties. But the army, which originally wanted to protect General Shifang and kill Li Yunxin's spirit, had a total of 1,200 people, but it had been completely wiped out. Qi Wen, who had revealed her true form, watched all this from the sky, and Red Lady cast her magical powers in the higher sky to maintain this restriction, trapping many of the demon navy in the huge water. At this time, it was really hard to say whether the allied forces had surrounded the 2 great demons, or the 2 great demons had surrounded the allied forces. When the attacks of the strange beasts gradually slowed down, the majestic Qi Wen's true form, wrapped in thunderclouds in the sky, flashed with a golden light, and returned to her human form. Wei River Lord Li Yunxin stood on the cloud and looked down. At this time, he was wearing a full suit of armor, shining brilliantly, majestic and gorgeous like a god of the astral world. And below, in the sea of corpses and blood, there was only a lone human figure standing there. The 1,200 demon soldiers were all killed, and a few demons with profound cultivation base saw that the situation was not good. So they killed their way out, leaving only General Shifang here. Li Yunxin slowly descended from the cloud, raised his hand, and those little people and strange beasts suddenly turned into many streams of light, and were all taken back by him. Just like that, there were no living beings within 100 feet of the general. The 2 of them seemed to be surrounded by the allied forces of the monsters and demons in the sea. But in reality, no one dared to act rashly anymore. After seeing Lu Ke's terrifying methods, who wouldn't be afraid of him releasing a flood of tyrannical beasts. Now that he had called back those ferocious beasts, it was more frightening to see the beasts spread out, but it was more frightening to see them swarm out. This fellow is terrifying. General Shifang was at the true realm and could have escaped with his life. But looking at his body now, it was tied up with a circle of shiny ropes. Electric arcs swam across the rope. Not only did the water demon not have the ability to use its magic, it couldn't even move its limbs. A quarter of an hour ago, he was still talking big with satisfaction. 10 breaths ago, he was still rejoicing that he had been pulled into the formation by the old tortoise, and that his life was not in danger. But he didn't expect things to change so quickly. In just 10 breaths he was tied up here. Although there were water demons around him, no one dared to come forward and save him. They could only see Li Yunxin's violent expression. He stared at him with a creepy gaze, and slowly landed in front of him. General Shifang had been promoted to his current position, so he naturally knew when to say what. Even though the sea was now almost full of water demons, and what he said and what happened today would spread throughout the entire ocean in the future, in order to save his life, what couldn't he do? Before the terrifying malefic star could speak, General Shifang immediately burst into tears and wailed, "Dragon King, please spare me." Li Yunxin landed in front of him, 3 steps away. Hearing General Shifang's earth-shattering howl, the surrounding sea demons made an uproar. There were disdainful, sympathetic, indignant, and some who wanted to rush up. The small demons in front of the formation were impulsive, but the big demons in charge of the army were not stupid. The Shinryu Immortal Lord forbade people from coming into contact with the people on land. But just like the East Ocean Dragon King, who wasn't curious about what was happening on land, they had thought that the so-called dragon son from the land was just a random dragon king. But now that he had shown his true form, he was more powerful and brilliant than any of the emperors on the sea. They also said that the demons on the land had low cultivation strength and were just a mob. But this person, no matter if it was the strength of his body, the vastness of his power, the depth of his realm, or the number of spiritual treasures, they were all beyond their imagination. If they had known that such a person was here, they wouldn't have come with only a few thousand soldiers. This person was already like this. How terrifying was the female demon who had been silently supporting him in the sky. At first, they thought that the female demon could only kill the Dragon King of the West Ocean when he was traveling alone. No matter how powerful she was, there was always a limit, and she couldn't compete with the army of demons in the sea. But now, if these 2 terrifying guys worked together, the remaining nearly 10,000 people would not only be unable to win, but would also have to retreat while fighting. It was all that General Shifang's fault. He had angered this malefic star. Why didn't he ask him to leave? These 2 people would require at least tens of thousands of Navy soldiers to resist them. What kind of monsters were these from the land? Now that such a monster was here, and they had just suffered a loss, who would want to live long enough to ask people to stop them? Only a few big demons shouted a few times to save face. They couldn't just watch their own kind fall into the hands of the people on the sea, not daring to help, and not saying a word. However, Li Yunxin didn't pay attention to those shouts. He was 3 steps away from General Shifang, but he only took 2 steps. When he took the first step, the sea monster had just finished howling and took a breath. When he took the second step, the sea monster opened his mouth again and wailed again, "Dragon King." These were the last 2 sentences he ever uttered in this world. Wei River Dragon King raised his hand and slapped him in the face first. The poor demons in the true state had strong bodies and were extremely difficult to die, which became the most terrifying thing at this time. Half of the bones in the General Shifang's face were smashed, and his 2 eyeballs hung out. No matter how he wanted to beg for mercy, he couldn't say a word. He screamed in pain, but he couldn't die. The dazzling rope on his body hung him up, but it also prevented him from falling down, unable to move. After smashing half of this guy's face, Li Yunxin reached out and pulled him. He didn't touch him at first, but just brushed him lightly. But in an instant, General Shifang's high-pitched scream went up a notch and turned into a whistle. All the armor and clothes on his body were turned into pieces. On his exposed skin, there was a cut that was so deep that the bone could be seen every finger's width. From his neck to his feet, the cuts were even and continuous. It seemed that an old master with exquisite knife skills had cut them one by one carefully with a thin and sharp knife. Li Yunxin's movements were as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest pause. As the cut marks appeared, he waved his hand again. A shower of water came out of nowhere. No, it was not rain but a strong smell of wine. It was the best aged jade wine in the Midland. The wine poured on the sea monster's body. He stretched his neck, and could only scream silently, but he couldn't make any sound. A great demon in the true state shouldn't be in such pain. The rope that tied him up must have a magical power that sealed all his abilities, making him no different from an ordinary person for the time being. After doing this, Li Yunxin didn't stop. He stared at him again and raised his hand again. There was a flurry of snow in the air. But it wasn't snow at all. It was obviously fine sea salt of the finest quality. Sea salt and strong wine were all sprinkled on the sea monster's wound. If his eyes were still there at this moment, they would have turned white from the pain. If his tongue was still there, he would have bitten it to commit suicide. Now both were gone. The muscles of the sea monster in the true state, which should be as hard as iron, were trembling quickly because of the extreme pain, as if he had a life of his own. Li Yunxin did all this in the blink of an eye. The surrounding demons were still stunned. They didn't know what to say. But the man from the Midlands slowly relaxed his brows, and his violent eyes softened a little. However, this softness didn't seem to be because his hatred for the General of 10 Directions was fading. It was more like he was originally violent and sinister, because the demon in front of him spoke arrogantly and made him hate him. But now he became gentle, because in his eyes, this was no longer a human or a demon. He had become a dish. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand and pinched a piece of meat on the General of 10 Directions with 2 fingers. With a little force, he tore it off smoothly. Once the piece of human meat left the demon's body, it immediately became transparent and elastic. It seemed to be some kind of conch meat or octopus meat. The true body of the General of 10 Directions was a nautilus, but in fact, it should be the meat of that nautilus. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes slightly, put such a piece of meat into his mouth, and chewed it. He swallowed it. The demons were all in an uproar, and then fell silent. It was not uncommon for demons to eat other demons. But why did this man from the Midland continent eat the General of 10 Directions of East Ocean in such a terrible way? If he remembered correctly, it was because he ignored the 3 people who had cursed him. It wasn't until the General of 10 Directions jumped out and said something about Madame Mingyue that he suddenly exploded. He had thought that it was just an excuse to attack the coalition army of demons and demons on the sea. But now looking at this scene, was it really just because of a few words? Was it really just for the General of 10 Directions? Was he going to take the head of the General of 10 Directions and eat its flesh raw from the army? What on earth was this terrifying man from the mind of Midland continent thinking? It was in such a strange silence that Li Yunxin ate half of the General of 10 Directions' body. The demon was still alive. Although half of his head was broken, he gradually learned how to make sounds with his chest and stomach. He was moaning miserably, and it was hard to tell whether he was cursing or begging for mercy. Every time he moved, his chest, which had been eaten by Li Yunxin until only half of his ribs and diaphragm were left, would rise and fall once. It was extremely terrifying. Maybe he was full, or maybe he was tired of eating. Suddenly, he spat into the sea and frowned. He flipped his palm again, and suddenly, a small transparent cube appeared. Without making a sound, he tossed the artifact into the sky, and then the broken body of the general into the sky as well. The transparent cube spun, and grew bigger with a buzzing sound, covering the remains of the General of 10 Directions within it. Both of them floated in the air motionless. It was as if this body was sealed in amber. However, this amber was one of the 10 great treasures in the history of Daotong, the immovable cube. Once this treasure was activated by the incantation and placed somewhere, it would be difficult to move it, even if the world was turned upside down, and the seas dried up, and the rocks crumbled. Now, It was sealing the tragic body of the General of 10 Directions, hanging in the sky of the East Sea. If not for Li Yunxin's incantation, it would probably remain there until the day the world was destroyed. He raised his hand and sneered. With a slight flick of his finger, 4 words appeared on the immovable cube. It was like the epitaph of the General of 10 Directions, but also like an epigram left for the future. Die of a cheap mouth. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the demons, he finished all this before rising into the air and standing on the immovable cube. With a cold expression, he said in a cold voice, "Little Yuer, dispel the restriction. Let this bunch of trash go for now. Tell them to go back to their respective masters if they have their lives." Li Yunxin, the Dragon King of the Wei River, has come to the East Sea. He's going to peel off the skin and pull out the tendons of these useless people one by one. Because some bastard of the East Sea King touched someone he shouldn't have. This debt will either be paid together, or with the head of Lord of the East Sea. Chapter 649. In this era, it was often said that a woman had to show enough respect to a man. Although Red Lady and Li Yunxin didn't have a particularly close relationship, she did show enough respect to him in front of the sea monsters. As soon as he finished his cold words, the female monster sneered in the sky. "You've settled the score, but I haven't. But now they look like stray dogs. It's disgusting. Go back and tell your masters. Anyone who says that they have eaten the flesh and blood of the Lord Dongting, cut it off and send it here. Or a few days later, I will go to them one by one. At that time, don't blame me for killing them." After saying this, the golden light in the sky suddenly dissipated, and the sunlight sprinkled down again. The frozen sea suddenly made waves, and the corpses piled up on it all fell down, dyeing a large area red. The monsters looked at each other, and for a moment, they were in a dilemma. This Wei River Lord and Red Madam's methods were truly frightening, far surpassing common sense. At first, they only thought that it was a powerful demon from the land, but there was always a limit to how powerful they were. Those people from the land were used to fighting alone, and were also used to gathering mobs, so they certainly hadn't seen the power of the elite army on the sea. Even a demon in the mysterious realm had to obediently surrender to the formation of thousands of people. Since they were attacking from all sides, they naturally had to take them down as soon as possible. They didn't expect that it was these 2 fiends. It wasn't that they weren't strong enough, but these 2 were too strong. Not to mention the one who was far beyond the mysterious realm, but that Lord Wei River of Shi, who was in the mysterious realm. Where did he get so many treasures and methods? In this confrontation, not only did they fail to protect the people they wanted to protect, but also a whole army was annihilated. Before, they thought that they couldn't lose their spirit, but now they had to think about whether to fight or to escape. But in the end, they still had to escape, or to put it nicely, temporarily avoid the sharp edge, and think about the long-term plan. They had to go back and carefully investigate the origin and methods of these 2 people from the land. Then they had to think about whether to win with a strange strategy, or to attack with the army. These things couldn't be decided by the demons leading the army. They had to let their masters decide. In the end, he used such a thought to convince himself. He cursed again in order to regain some face for himself. But he cursed very carefully, afraid that he would anger the 2 devils again. Only then did he ring the gong and leave. After these demons retreated, Red Lady descended from the sky and returned to Li Yunxin's side. He stood on the immovable cube. The immovable cube was quite big. It could hold 2 people, and was about the size of a quiet room. Li Yunxin did not seem to be in a hurry to leave this place. Instead, he took out a table from his sleeve with a wave of his hand. He spread a piece of paper on the table, and pulled out a pen from somewhere. He waved his hand at the surface of the sea, and a column of water rose up. More than 1,000 demons had died, and the seawater had been dyed red. Now when he dipped the brush into the water, it was as if he had dipped it in cinnabar. Li Yunxin put the pen on the paper. Red Lady stood still, looked at the paper, and then looked at his brush. She was a little puzzled. "What are you doing?" Li Yunxin snorted and laughed. "Look, Su Yusong and Zhuo Muzha wrote down the love letter on paper. When you and I saw it, We felt that it was interesting, right? Two people with supernatural powers, but they wrote love letters with a mortal's pen and paper. Ah, how romantic. But now, we had a great battle on the sea. It was the first time we showed off our might and made a name for ourselves. Isn't this kind of thing worth writing about? Ha, I'll learn from them. I'll write like this and keep it. In the future, when people see this, they will also think that I'm an interesting person. Don't you think so? Let me think. The first sentence I should write. He pondered for a moment and put down the brush. While writing, he said, "The autumn wind is cool, the colorful flags flutter. Today we welcome the annual." When he said the first sentence, Red Lady smiled. Previously, she was hurt by Li Yunxin on Cloud Mountain. She said that the two of them had broken off all ties. But later she chased Su Sheng away. It was said that she chased him all the way to Tokaria. During this period, she didn't know what happened or what reason she understood. Now that she saw him again on the sea, although she was a little jealous like a little girl, she didn't have the appearance of being entangled with him like before. Perhaps it was because of the fusion with the dragon soul. Her obsession as a ghost cultivator had weakened a lot. When she smiled at this time, she looked more like an old friend or confidant. Perhaps she also knew that this kind of relationship made people like Li Yunxin feel more comfortable. She listened to Li Yunxin with a smile, and when he put down the brush, she also looked at the paper. Then her expression changed slightly. What Li Yunxin said was completely different from what he wrote. Now what was written on the paper was, "My words may be heard by someone at any time. If you want to help me, you can do one thing for me." Writing up to this point, Li Yunxin looked at Red Lady with a smile. "How about this start?" His voice was clear and his smile was bright. It seemed that he was really writing to express his feelings. Red Lady blinked her eyes. Although it can't be compared to the great heroes of the human world, it doesn't sound bad. What about the following? Li Yunxin laughed. Haha. I said these to tease Lure. I thought you would feel bad after hearing it. Since you feel bad, let me think. According to this tone, the next should be, the demon warriors on the sea are full of spirit and fighting spirit, determined to win glory for Jun Shang. But when it fell on the paper, it was written, I have a person in my hand that the owner of Southernwood House wants. A few days ago, I used this person to threaten the owner of Southernwood House to come to see me in person and give me an explanation. But now my plan has changed. Wan. He paused and pointed at the word Wan. Can't ask her to come to see me, can't ask her to come to the sea. Red Lady's eyes stayed on the word she for a while. She looked up at Li Yunxin. Hey Jun Shang. It should be our respective Jun Shang. The demons already had quite a few Jun Shang. Who knew if a few more would pop up? Speaking of this, I think those female demons in the sea may want to make a contribution this time, so that they can get Jun Shang's favor and be accepted by him. Li Yunxin spread his hands helplessly. How can they have so many thoughts? These fiendish demons were struggling just to stay alive. Moreover, it's not like a female demon thinks about those things. Speaking of this, he quickly closed his mouth. He blinked and pretended to bow to her to show that he had said something wrong. Well, I'll add each. Other than this, how about the rest? Red Lady slightly pouted and bit her red lips. She said reluctantly, not bad. Li Yunxin heaved a sigh of relief. Haha, it's good that it's not bad. Then the next is, he wrote as he said, it's about my life. He looked at Red Lady seriously. Thank you for your kindness. Red Lady stared at the word Qing for a while. She suddenly blushed. She looked at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin was stunned. He suddenly realized something. Even though he had lived in this world for a long time, he had lived in the previous world for even longer. His way of thinking still had some traces of the previous world. In that world, when the word Qing was mentioned, the first impression was Dear Qing, please rise, or Dear Qing, please rise. Then there were names with the word Qing. Things like Chongqing, Xiaoqing, and so on. He wrote this word as friend, but it could also be used as a form of respect. Calling each other this way would make their relationship seem closer. Only then did he remember that in the secular world of this world, there was another widely used meaning, husband and wife addressing each other. The so-called whispering to each other came from this. But who asked Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu to never use this word before? Li Chunfeng called Shang Guanyu Aiwe, and Shang Guanyu called Li Chunfeng Xiaoguan. It was even more mushy than the word Qing. He was about to speak when Red Lady suddenly flew up. After all, you're talking about yourself. It turns out I'm not involved at all. Take your time to write it. I want to see which reckless person dares to claim to have eaten my father's flesh. After saying this, she ignored Li Yunxin and went straight to the west. Li Yunxin raised his hand. He didn't know what to say. He simply didn't say anything. He looked at the piece of paper on the table again. He raised his hand and was about to throw it into the sea. But at this moment, the water under the immovable cube surged. A human figure separated from the blood water. Li Yunxin fished the paper back and held it in his hand. He summoned the true fire in his palm and instantly burned it to ashes. The person who emerged from the water was none other than Lord Donghai. It seemed that because his previous incarnation was sealed by Li Yunxin, this time it was his real body. Red Lady had just left, and he appeared right after her. Perhaps he had been hiding under the water for a long time. Li Yunxin watched him slowly rise and stop in the air. He raised his eyebrows. Lord Donghai, have you been here since the beginning and watched me slaughter your Sea clan? Or have you arrived immediately after receiving the news? But Lord Donghai only stared at him, looking him up and down. His expression was not very good. When he first met Li Yunxin on the Taowu, he carefully looked at him. However, the strength that Li Yunxin displayed at that time was beyond his expectations. Thus, when the two of them met in the water prison for the second time, he carefully sized up Li Yunxin, as if to re-evaluate her. But now, Li Yunxin's strength had exceeded his previous evaluation. He had to re-evaluate this guy in front of him. In fact, it was the former. He had arrived long ago. How could he not know that more than 10,000 Sea Clan soldiers had come to his East Sea? So he came to see for himself. When he saw General Shifeng leading the army to surround Li Yunxin and Red Lady, he decided to watch from the sidelines. He might not know how things would develop in the end, but at least he knew that it was not a bad thing to make the arrogant Wei River Dragon King suffer a setback. Who knew that what he saw was a bloody massacre? It was not the Sea Clan against the two mainlanders, but the Dragon King against the Sea Clan. This Li Yunxin was really terrifying. Indeed, he had to completely put away any contempt in his heart. Lord Donghai frowned slightly, looked at General Shifeng who was sealed in the motionless square statue, and then looked at Li Yunxin. Does what Lord Wei River said in the prison still count? Li Yunxin smiled coldly. Have you thought it through? First you asked such a guy with low EQ to invite us. Then we hid in the water and watched those insolent creatures clamor at us. Now that you found out that your plan has failed, you came out to ask me if it still counts. Lord Donghai, you want to take all the good things for yourself. To tell you the truth, I have seen Shinryu a few days ago. I told him the conversation between you and me in the water prison. Now the Divine Lord knows very well what you are thinking. Take a guess. Does what I said a few days ago still count? Lord Donghai's eyes widened. But he was not shocked. He was not a stupid person. He knew that although what Li Yunxin said was scary, since it was said to him, there must be room for negotiation. Seeing him like this, Li Yunxin sneered and turned around. He took out a piece of magic paper from his sleeve and spread it on the table, writing something. I was in a good mood, he said as he wrote. But when I saw you, it was all gone. She glanced at him again and said, Don't you like to be hesitant and wavering? Now there are only two ways in front of you. One is to continue to be your good son, good Dragon King. Let's see if Lord Donghai will believe me or you, and see if it will make you die faster. The second way is what I said to you in the water prison. But this time once you agree, you can't get off the boat. I can tell Lord Donghai that I have scared you, and said that I will use you to get rid of the remaining 7 Dragon King, and then get rid of you. Then when the time comes, if my guess is right, and the Rock King has really appeared, I will tell her the news. If I guess wrong, and he is still in the water prison, I have a way to get him out. Then I can protect you and turn the tables on her. Now both ways are here. I don't care which way you go. You choose which way to go. When he said these words, His face was cold. He scolded this Donghai Dragon King, as if he was scolding his son. But after saying the last two sentences, he paused and suddenly laughed, as if he thought of something funny. So he repeated to himself, "You choose how you want to go." He seemed to be quite proud of these two sentences. In the eyes of Lord Donghai, his reaction was another evidence that this man is very scheming, unpredictable, and unpredictable. After saying these words, Li Yunxin raised his hand, and the magic paper on the table flew to Lord Donghai. "But no matter which way you choose, give this to Lady Mingyue." He put down the pen, and turned to look at Lord Donghai. "What I said to the Sea clan before may have been to scare them. But there is one way that is not. You touch someone you shouldn't touch. If you dare to disrespect her, there will be a second tomb next to the one under my feet." Lord Donghai reached out, and took the magic paper. He glanced at it and saw only 3 words written on it. "Do you know?" He was stunned, not knowing what these 3 words meant. But when he heard what Li Yunxin said next, he frowned and said in a low voice, "Why would I disrespect her? I adore her." Li Yunxin turned around. "Get out of here. If I see you or hear this kind of bullshit again before you think about it, you will be skinned and pulled out." The face of the Donghai Dragon King suddenly turned translucent, with a very strange blue color. A terrible momentum emanated from his body, and his anger could be felt even from 10 meters away. But Li Yunxin ignored him, and turned his back to him, seemingly unguarded. The Dragon King glared at him angrily for more than 10 breaths, before he abruptly retracted his aura, and dived back into the sea with a boom. Chapter 650. An hour later, the entire Penglai Island felt the wrath of the Dragon King of the East Sea. The sky above the island was covered with dark clouds, as if the night had come early. Thunder exploded one after another, as if the master of the East Sea was roaring. In fact, he was indeed roaring. In the courtyard where Huang Guanzi, who claimed to be the messenger of the Freemasonry, was. "That's how he talks to me." Lord Donghai waved the magic paper in his hand, his hair loose, and his clothes open. It seemed that this was the only way to vent the anger in his heart, and not let it burn him. 1,000 years. Who dares to talk to me like this? How dare you? Madame Mingyue is still in my hands. Ah! I'm so angry. Huang Guanzi put his hands in his sleeves, and sat upright on the stone bench. He used his magical power to protect the area 3 feet around him, so that it would not end up like other places. The blue bricks covering the ground had already been shaken into powder. The bamboo trees in the courtyard were also turned into ashes. The bamboo house behind him was also destroyed, and only 3 or 4 of the magic instruments he brought were spared. The courtyard seemed to have gone through a fire, and there were embers everywhere. He was silent, because he knew that no words could ease the current Dragon King of the East Sea. In front of the power of the East Sea Dragon King, the emperors in the secular world were just like princes. But such a figure was severely reprimanded, and after being told to get out, he really left obediently. This great demon of the mysterious realm could be considered to have restrained his reaction after such a thing happened. He only destroyed the courtyard and not the whole island, which really deserved the reputation of forbearance and silence. Huang Guanzi's eyes were not on Lord Donghai, but on the paper in his hand. Lord Donghai only said that Li Yunxin asked him to give this paper to Madame Mingyue, but he never said what was written. But it didn't matter, he had seen clearly, it was written. Do you know? Since he had seen it, he would let Lord Donghai rage for a while. Then he reached out and carefully stroked his beard. "Lord, now that it has come to this, we can't hesitate anymore. Let's do as Li Yunxin said." Lord Donghai stopped abruptly, and turned to look at him with a pale face. The flames around him were still surging, as if he had just walked out of a sea of fire. His eyes widened, and his originally handsome face was slightly out of shape. "Do as he says." "What are you doing? Get lost." Huang Guanzi was not afraid of his terrifying appearance. Instead, he patiently and seriously said, "I told ruler about Li Yunxin's abilities in the past, and told ruler to be careful." Lord Donghai frowned. "Are you blaming me? Are you blaming me for being careless? Huang Guanzi waved his hand. Now that things have come to this, does it matter who is right and who is wrong? It's just that after going through all these things, Juanshang should know that it's me who said too little, and Juanshang who looked down on me. But there really isn't any reason why he Li Yunxin is incompetent. A few days ago, Juanshang came back and told me about this matter. I told him to listen to him for now, cooperate with him, and then kill him. But there is no other meaning. Juanshang said to wait a few days to think about it. As a result, in just a few days, he killed many big demons on the sea, and added a helper. I mentioned this helper to Juanshang before, but I didn't expect that he really had the guts to come to the sea. Mentioned it, Lord Donghai said with hatred, but he didn't say anything else. The flames around him slowly subsided, so the dark clouds in the sky slowly dispersed, and the lightning also slowly dissipated. As usual, the anger of the Dragon King of Donghai came and went quickly. The ashes in the air slowly fell, accumulating a thin layer on his shoulders. Huang Guanzi also softened his tone a little. Now I will tell Juanshang in detail. This red lady is the daughter of Lord Dongting and Dongting Lake of Qing Kingdom in Zhonglu. She is the princess of Dongting. In Dongting, half of the dragon soul was sealed. This dragon soul was used as the array, to suppress the sealed supreme golden rock. Before Lord Dongting came to the sea, he refined the other half of the dragon soul into Red Lady's body. She also had all kinds of adventures in Yunshan, and her soul merged with the dragon soul, gaining great power. As for how strong this power is, Juanshang, you should know that after Shinryu transformed half of the dragon soul, he used the other half to transform the dragon sun on the land. The rest is today's Shinryu. Huang Guanzi carefully looked at Lord Donghai's face. It is difficult to deal with Li Yunxin with such a helper. In the past he was alone, and we could think of other ways. But now, Juanshang, let's agree with him. With his power, we can do our own things. After everything is done, we can think about what to do next. You can be angry again, but after calming down, it is time to do something. Lord Donghai glared at Huang Guanzi. After a while he raised the magic paper in his hand. What about this? What does it mean? Li Yunxin's father is a member of Mu Nanju. After he was born, his father has been carrying out the mission of Mu Nanju, and kept him as a hostage. His mother, Lady Mingyue, although she knows some of the details, she should not know that she kept him as a hostage. In my opinion, these 3 words are asking if Lady Mingyue knows about that matter. Juanshang previously said. The anger on Lord Donghai's face slowly dissipated. He gradually relaxed his brows, took the paper in front of him and read it again, then sighed. So it is like this. When Lady Mingyue came here, she said she wanted to see Shinryu for her son. It should be like this. Alas, it seems that Shinryu and Li Yunxin. Huang Guanzi looked at Lord Donghai. His eyes suddenly flashed, and he said calmly, Juanshang, don't you know the secret of Dragon Island? Ha! Lord Donghai frowned. Secret. At this time, since Lord Donghai had restrained his anger, Huang Guanzi removed the restriction around him. He stood up and bowed his head slightly. He paced a few steps thoughtfully, then said, I have something. I didn't tell you before because I thought it was useless to say more, and it might cause you unnecessary trouble. But now that Li Yunxin is involved, I have to ask you if you want to hear it. Lord Donghai was anxious. Sir, why didn't you tell me the secret earlier? Tell me, tell me. Huang Guanzi stopped and looked at him. Do you know about the astral world and the netherworld? Lord Donghai was stunned. The astral world is the residence of the celestials. The netherworld? Which netherworld are you referring to? The underworld and the netherworld could both be called the netherworld. This word had many meanings, but Lord Donghai realized that Huang Guanzi must be referring to one of them. Sure enough, Huang Guanzi's face was solemn. He said in a low voice, You must have heard that Black Bai Yanjun is a celestial from the astral world. He made a big mistake, and was sent to the human world to be the god of the underworld. The celestials live in the astral world. Corresponding to it, there is the netherworld. The condemned god is sent to the netherworld, where he is tortured. The ruler of the astral world is the celestial man, and the ruler of the netherworld is the Mother Earth of the netherworld. The Mother Earth of the Netherworld is a god since ancient times, and has an irreconcilable feud with the Celestials from the astral world. The Celestials who committed crimes are sent there to fight with the Mother Earth of the Netherworld. Only by killing the Mother Earth can they return to the astral world. Huang Guanzi paused. The entrance to the Netherworld is on the Dragon Island. The Shinryu guards the entrance. Lord Donghai's face slowly showed a suspicious expression. He looked at Huang Guanzi. Why have I never heard of this? Huang Guanzi said calmly. Not only have you never heard of it, but few people in the world have heard of it. If you don't believe me, you can listen to what I have to say. Do you know, why did I come here other than for that Li Yunxin? Lord Donghai frowned again. Sir, you have too many secrets and goals. Huang Guanzi smiled. Don't you also have secrets? You and I have been together for so long. We don't need to be honest, but it is enough as long as we benefit each other. Other than Li Yunxin, I am also here for the entrance to the Netherworld. The former elders of the Freemasonry are on Cloud Mountain. It is said that they are all reincarnations of Celestials. But during the Battle of Cloud Mountain, they actually abandoned us. When the cultivators of the Taoist sect were fighting against the allied forces of the demons and monsters, a rain of fire suddenly fell from the sky. Many people said that it was a method that Li Yunxin used to draw the qi of the earth from the mother and child instrument. But I know that was the method of the elders. In order to achieve their goals, they didn't care about our lives. Hehe. When Huang Guanzi said this, he laughed coldly. It was as if he was reminiscing about the past. It turns out that after working hard for so many years, we are just pawns that can be abandoned at any time. Helping each other, helping each other, helping each other in the same boat. In the end, it is all a lie. Then don't blame us for boarding another ship. Lord Donghai had always been interested in Huang Guanzi's background. It could also be said that he was very interested in the Freemasonry. But Huang Guanzi was usually very tight-lipped and wouldn't easily reveal anything. But now that he had said so much, it finally made him excited. He asked curiously, another ship? Like this one in the East Sea? Huang Guanzi smiled. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this ship in the East Sea is not big enough. We also want to kill a god. Lord Donghai frowned in confusion, but soon he relaxed, and his eyes widened. You mean, if the elders are really reincarnations of Celestials, they come from the star realm. Mortals regard the Celestials of the star realm as gods, but now we know that they can also be afraid, and also use some tricks. Then it is not impossible for us to obtain their power. The Taoist sect has cultivated for tens of thousands of years, and there are only a few hundred saints who have succeeded and ascended. But if we can find a way to go to the star realm, maybe we don't need to cultivate anymore. Lord Donghai interrupted him. I know. You don't know where the entrance to the star realm is, but you know where the entrance to the Netherworld is. So you want to go to the Netherworld and find those Celestials who have been demoted. Get some information from them, and then use it for your own use. He shook his head, as if what Huang Guanzi said had made him forget his anger just now. But how do you know that you have a way to deal with the gods in the Netherworld? If what you said is true, and there are so many Nether Mother in the Netherworld, that even the Celestials can't deal with. Ha, sir, you don't know what it is like in the Netherworld. What if it is all light and flame, and the endless void? Huang Guanzi smiled slightly. It is because we don't know that we have to try. Now is the first step. I want to assist Lord Donghai to become the only Dragon King on the sea, so we can get close to the entrance to the Netherworld. Once we succeed and get the power of the gods in the Netherworld, we can not only take revenge on the elders of Yunshan, but also share this power with you. But the premise of all this is, you have to save your life and achieve great things. He stood up and solemnly cupped his hands to Lord Donghai. Lord, make a decision. Don't lose a lot of things in the future, because of a moment of impulse. Lord Donghai was silent for a while and sighed. Alas, a few days ago, I even had the idea of sparing Li Yunxin's life. But now, I can promise you. But after the deed is done, Li Yunxin must die. He must pay for what he did today. Huang Guanzi nodded. These are small matters. Lord Donghai glanced at the letter in his hand again. This is your private matter. Huang Guanzi laughed. I don't have a family. How can I give advice? The great demon sighed. Alas, you people are so heartless. Lord Donghai left the courtyard where Huang Guanzi was, and went to Lady Mingyue's residence. He thought about it along the way, but he couldn't decide whether to show her the thin magic paper or not. But finally, when he walked on the long rainbow bridge, he made a decision. He stopped at the bridge, and didn't set foot on the island. With a little force in his hand, the magic paper flew up like a bird, and went straight into the depths of the dense forest. He didn't leave, but used his supernatural power and waited quietly. About a quarter of an hour later, he heard crying. Even if he tried to suppress it, he couldn't hide it from the great demon of the mysterious realm. He frowned uneasily. After hesitating again and again, he wanted to go into the dense forest. But at this moment, he suddenly heard someone shouting on the other side of the bridge. He turned around and looked. It was the junior colonel outside his hall. My lord. The junior colonel lowered his voice and shouted from afar. Someone claims to be the messenger of the Freemasonry and asks to see my lord. Lord Donghai was stunned. Then he walked across the long bridge in 4 steps and came to the junior colonel. What? The junior colonel glanced to the north. I'm also puzzled. The day before yesterday, he went to Aquarius Bay to bring people back to the island. This time he brought more than 30 people. Just now, when this group of people entered the island, someone was so bold that he ran to me and said he was the messenger of the Freemasonry and asked to see my lord. I know that there is a Freemasonry messenger in the north of our island, so I hurried to report to my lord. Lord Donghai slowly frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, Bring him to see me. Lord Donghai met this messenger in the south. There was a dock in the south. The mortals who had been sent to the island disembarked here, and temporarily took shelter here. So the shelter was slowly built. At first, it was a few low shacks, and then it became a small street. As more and more people passed, the small street became a main street, and finally it became a small town today. After many years, there were several generations and thousands of people in the town. When Lord Donghai was in a good mood, he would turn into a mortal and walk in this town. When he and the junior colonel met the messenger, in a big house in the town, the first thing this fat man said was, I'm Wu Jiasong. I'm a messenger from the Freemasonry. I came to see my lord to save your life. Chapter 651. Because of this sentence, the East Sea King Dragon and the junior colonel looked at each other. Then they laughed together. Like the relatively approachable dignitaries in the secular world, the East Sea King often heard similar words. For example, I am ordered by the gods to help you. East Sea King is in great danger, don't you know it? He had heard the phrase, to save Lord Donghai's life 3 or 4 times. Of course, the sea monsters were interested in the people and things on the land, so they learned these words from the land. Maybe some people from the land accidentally wandered into the demon's lair and spoke in such a tone because of a word. Most of them should die after saying it, and only a few survived. Because of something called survivor bias, this kind of tone was very effective. Wu Jiasong, who said this, was standing in a big room with the same layout as the inn on the land. His clothes were half wet. The sea monsters used boats to transport people, but they could only ensure that these people would not drown. The boat moved as fast as the wind. When it reached the south pier, the hull was half full of water. No matter how much he cherished his demeanor, there was no way he could dry himself. This made him look a little embarrassed. If he was a handsome man with fluttering sleeves and muttering to himself with his hands behind his back, he might be able to fool the Lord of Donghai for a while. The demon master and servant laughed, but Wu Jiasong calmly kept a straight face. He waited quietly for the two to stop laughing, and then cupped his hands. These days, my lord must have suffered a lot in the hands of Li Yunxin. Do you know that although Li Yunxin is difficult to deal with, there is someone more difficult to deal with coming to the East Sea? The East Sea King stopped laughing. The junior colonel laughed again, but when he saw his lord's expression, he quickly closed his mouth. You know Li Yunxin? The big demon looked at him seriously. Who are you? I am an emissary of the Freemasons. But I already have an emissary of the Freemasons here. He also said what you said to me now. The East Sea King frowned. Don't you know each other? Wu Jiasong thought for a moment and said with a sullen face. My lord, I only sent me to the East Sea, no one else. Who is the person beside Jun Shang? Lord Donghai looked at him with interest. Since you call yourself an emissary, why don't you take a guess? Wu Jiasong calmly said. I'm afraid that person isn't who he claims to be. Ruler, why don't you say his name? I can immediately give you an answer. But Lord Donghai shook his head and leaned back in his chair. Why don't you tell me who the other person you mentioned is more difficult to deal with? Let me see if it's different from what he said. Then I'll think about whether I should believe you or not. Wu Jiasong flatly refused. I can tell Lord Donghai. But Lord Donghai might tell this to the impostor. If he finds out about this, it will be troublesome. Lord Donghai sneered. That person doesn't have as many concerns as you do. You're talking about a woman whose cultivation base is extremely close to the Grand Supreme level, right? She's already come to the East Sea. Your news is already too late. If you tell me your identity now, I can leave your corpse intact. He stood up, as if he was no longer interested in talking to him. He said to the colonel, You stay and interrogate him. Just leave his soul. The big demon turned around and was about to leave. The colonel got the order and looked at Wu Jiasong fiercely. A trace of panic finally appeared on the face of the man who claimed to be an emissary. But he seemed to be confident that he still had other means. He slowly took a step back and said before the colonel grabbed his arm, I'm not talking about Red Lady. You're talking about the Princess of Dongting, aren't you? There is another person in the world who is more difficult to deal with than her. But Lord Donghai didn't stop. Now I've changed my mind. I don't want to keep the soul of such a bluffing person. After saying this, he walked out of the door. The colonel grabbed Wu Jiasong's arm. Wu Jiasong shook it off and shouted, It's the reincarnation of the painting saint of Xianmen, my sworn enemy, and the owner of Mu Nanju. Lord Donghai stopped and turned around. The colonel also let go of his hand. Humph. If you said that earlier, you wouldn't have to suffer. The big demon walked back into the room. The colonel just grabbed him hard. Wu Jiasong's clothes were torn apart, and a large piece of flesh on his arm was torn. He gasped and realized that this Lord Donghai was not as stupid as he looked just now. Now you have a chance to tell me the whole story. Lord Donghai returned to the room and sat down. He put on a solemn expression. But don't play tricks. I've heard enough of those words. This was a very old-fashioned trick. Even in the secular government, it might not be able to fool those experienced gangsters. However, now that it was used by Lord Donghai, Wu Jiasong was tricked. It was not that he didn't know this trick. He didn't expect that the Dragon King of Donghai would use such a trick on a person like him. But things had come to this. He looked at the colonel, and then at Lord Donghai. He had to clench his teeth and point a few times on his arm to stop the bleeding. Then he said, If you want to listen carefully, I'll tell you in detail first. Lord Donghai, do you know Mu Nanju? If you ask me if I know anything again, you won't have a chance to live. Lord Donghai frowned. Only I ask you, not you. Do you understand? Do you understand? The colonel shouted even louder. Wu Jiasong frowned and had to sigh. Yes. To answer Lord Donghai. I was a member of the Freemasonry, lurking in Mu Nanju. A few days ago, I learned that Li Yunxin was coming to the East Sea by ship, so I followed him. Another woman of the Freemasonry came with me. She didn't know my identity. However, she had carelessly revealed a flaw in front of Li Yunxin and was discovered. In order to prevent her from divulging more information, I had to reveal my identity as the shopkeeper of Mu Nanju and kill her. At least I could fool Li Yunxin. Then Li Yunxin asked me to go back to Mu Nanju to report. He said that the important person we want is in his hands. If we want to get him back, we must ask my master to see him in person. Wu Jiasong paused here. I didn't understand his meaning at first. But after knowing some things these days, I realized that asking the master of Mu Nanju to see him was a lie, and asking for help was the truth. He wants to challenge the authority of the Dragon King on the sea, so he naturally needs a strong helper. The master of Mu Nanju is unfathomable. Once he makes a move, few people in the world can stop him. Now that I know that Hong Nyangzi is also here, I am even more convinced of my speculation. Lord Donghai, Li Yunqin has a big plan. Only by cooperating with us can we turn the tide. The Dragon King of the East Sea looked at the colonel beside him, then at Wu Jiasong. So, you mean that Li Yunqin asked you to go back and find the master of Mu Nanju? But you come to me at once. Why? What do you want? Wu Jiasong frowned and said, Li Yunqin is our old enemy. Although I don't know what he wants, we can't let him get what he wants. Not to mention that the master of Mu Nanju is involved. Lord Donghai raised his hand. Okay, I got it. He turned to the junior colonel standing beside him and said, This guy can't explain anything. He just wants to save my life. Mr. Huang Guanzi, on the other hand, explained everything clearly. He even said that Mr. Huang Guanzi is a spy. Ha ha ha, preposterous, preposterous. Wu Jiasong shouted, My lord, that person must be a spy of Mu Nanju. If he gives me another. But Lord Donghai had already stood up for the second time and looked at him coldly. Half a month ago, Mr. Huang Guanzi told me that there must be a spy of Mu Nanju, who claimed to be a Freemasonry envoy. If I said that I already have one here, he would definitely confuse me. He even gave me a way to tell the truth with one try. Now Humph, let's see if you are the real deal. After saying this, he suddenly turned over his palm. He threw a shiny object to Wu Jiasong and shouted, Tell me, what is this? Wu Jiasong caught it subconsciously and took a look. It looked like a ball of tangled hemp rope. But as soon as he touched it, he knew that it was not fabric, but iron. It was as thin as paper and only as thick as coarse cotton thread. It was tangled together and turned into a ball of this kind of iron wire. This thing didn't look special. But Wu Jiasong really couldn't figure out how it was made. If a skilled craftsman had carefully hammered the iron sheet to such thickness and then cut it into threads, how could it be cut so evenly and neatly? And how could it be tangled together like this? While he was hesitating, Lord Donghai sneered. This thing is called a steel wire ball. Do you recognize it? When a Freemasonry envoy goes out on a mission, he must bring something inconspicuous. But it is difficult for the craftsmen in the world to imitate. Since you don't know this thing, what about yours? Wu Jiasong was stunned and said hurriedly, I came out in a hurry, and I pretended to be Mu Nanju. Humph. Lord Donghai sneered again and turned to leave. The colonel grabbed Wu Jiasong's arm and said, Let's go. Go to jail. Wu Jiasong couldn't struggle. Although his kung fu was high, it was only kung fu. The little demon was a demon with cultivation, and it was easy to subdue him. How could Wu Jiasong break free? An hour later, Lord Donghai reappeared in the courtyard where Huang Guanzi was. Previously, he had destroyed this courtyard, but in such a short period of time, everything had been restored to its original state. Lord Donghai wasn't surprised by all this, as if he was used to it. When he arrived at the courtyard, Huang Guanzi wasn't there. Lord Donghai waited for a while, but didn't enter the house to see. The bamboo house in the courtyard could be seen at a glance, and there were no secrets. And with his identity as Lord Donghai, he wouldn't do something like that in private. After waiting for about a quarter of an hour, Huang Guanzi came back. He held 2 or 3 wildflowers in his hand. The stems were slender, and the leaves were lush. The flowers were elegant and small, dotting the branches. It didn't look like the green leaves matched the flowers, but the flowers matched the green leaves. In the other hand, he held 3 fish. Each fish was only the size of a palm, slender, long, scaleless, and extremely small, as if they were born to be eaten by humans. He was originally ugly and wretched, but now he walked in through the bamboo door like this, and there was something indifferent about him. Lord Donghai was a little impatient, and when he heard the footsteps, he turned around and was about to speak, but when he saw him like this, he was stunned. Huang Guanzi was also stunned. Then he looked at the fish in his hand and said embarrassedly, This. Lord Donghai glanced at the fish in his hand and raised his eyebrows. Ha! I thought you liked to eat vegetarian. It turns out that you also like to eat fish. It's no big deal. Don't demons on the land eat delicacies from the mountains? When people are hungry, they will eat people. We demons in the sea don't eat seafood. So what do we eat? Speaking of this, he smiled. It's still thin scales. I used to. But then he realized that he had said something wrong, so he smiled and changed the topic. Sir, do as you please. I just came to ask you something. I want to see how you people on the land take care of this while I ask. Huang Guanzi came in with the fish and flowers, frowning slightly. What happened? Lord Donghai sat down on the stone bench and smiled. No hurry, no hurry. Sir, please go ahead. Huang Guanzi looked at him and thought for a while. Okay. There were stone tables and benches in the courtyard, and on the west side, there was a fire pit built with large pebbles. The 3 fish had been cut open and washed, so he first separated the fish on the stone and put the flowers on the window sill of the bamboo house. Then he walked to the side of the grass, made a stroke in the air with his hand, and drew out a pool of water. He washed his hands in the pool of water and took a bamboo tube from the window sill. This bamboo tube was wide at the bottom and narrow at the top, and it was open like a vase, and it was indeed used as a vase. He scooped some water from the pool, put it back on the window sill, and put the 3 flowers in. Then he smiled at Lord Donghai and waved his hand. The water in the air fell to the ground noisily, but the grass on the ground caught it, and it did not splash everywhere. Then he reached out and touched the fire pit and pulled. A vigorous rootless fire rose with a whoosh, and it was no different from a bonfire made by mortals. This courtyard was surrounded by thin bamboos. The bamboo leaves were more slender than those on the land, and there were light green spots on them, as if the mottled moonlight fell on them at night. For some reason it was called Suju. Now many thin branches had reached over the fence, and Huang Guanzi reached out and broke off a few bamboo branches. He pierced 3 fish with 3 bamboo branches and hung them over the fire to roast. He did this without saying a word, as if he had forgotten that Lord Donghai was present. It seemed that he was just looking for wild game, because he was greedy for it. Lord Donghai did not rush him, and just watched quietly. There were 2 people in the courtyard, a vase of flowers, a fire, and 3 fish. It was like a simple friendship between gentlemen. A quarter of an hour passed. The fish skin was slightly yellow, and the faint fishy smell turned into a strong aroma. Huang Guanzi reached out and scratched the fish. Fine salt fell from the air, adding flavor to the delicacy. After that, he turned to Lord Donghai. Lord, what do you want to say? Lord Donghai let out an ah. It was as if he was fascinated by watching him roast fish. At this time, he shook his head slightly, smiled, and stared at Huang Guanzi, saying, Sir, you really have some good cooking skills. Well, I'm just curious. It is said that the owner of Southwood Jew is the reincarnation of the art saint. Is the supernatural power you used just now also a skill of the art Tao? Chapter 652. Hearing this, Huang Guanzi was not in a hurry to answer. He smiled, took a roasted fish and handed it to Lord Donghai, but did not let go. Lord Donghai reached out to take it. With just a glance, he tore off a piece of fish with his teeth. After chewing for a while, he swallowed. I've said it before. It's nothing. There are no taboos like other places. After tasting it again, he frowned slightly. Good taste. You only use salt to taste it. Huang Guanzi twirled his beard. It's all about the heat. The fish is tender, and the meat with fine scales is even more tender. This kind of ingredient is fresh and tender. Ordinary methods may waste natural resources, so I used the true fire of the painting path to cook it. The rootless fire of the painting path is not like ordinary firewood. Although there is no special aroma, it does not affect the natural fragrance of the fish. It is 3 times hotter than ordinary fire. Once the fish comes into contact with the fire, the skin will be charred first. The juice at the bottom will be locked into the meat, unable to escape. Turn to a gentle fire. Roast the fish inside to medium well, and sprinkle salt to prevent the water from coming out. When eating, there will be both the charred outside and the tender inside, naturally delicious. Saying this, he also took a tail and ate it. Tasting it carefully, he said, Lord is right. This is the method of the painting path. Since Lord asked this, I guess. Today the people from Southernwood House will arrive. Lord Donghai twirled the bamboo branch and looked at him. Yes. But he did not say anything else. Huang Guanzi smiled again. As I expected. With so many things happening in the Eastern Sea, how could Southernwood House, which has always been competing with us, not make a move? Let me guess. The owner of Southernwood House is about to arrive, right? Lord Donghai tore the fish with his hands, piece by piece, steaming hot. Hearing this, he grunted again. What do you think, teacher? In my opinion, Lord probably does not believe that person's words. But he is still somewhat unhappy, so he came here to find peace of mind. Huang Guanzi laughed. Then I will give Lord peace of mind. The person should be using Southernwood House's owner as a bargaining chip. He claimed that if Jun Shang cooperated with him, he would not spread the news. But in fact, no matter what, this news will be released. If he is really from Southernwood House, and is pretending to be our emissary. Lord, don't kill him for now. Tonight, I will confront him personally. Do you still want it? Lord Donghai froze for a moment, and realized that he was asking about the fish. The fish was small, and the great demon only picked the tender meat to eat. In the time it took for Huang Guanzi to say these few words, he had unknowingly finished eating both sides of the plump side. Only then did he let out an ah and waved his hand to decline. Sir, please use it. He stood up again. Since that's the case, I won't disturb Mister's interest any longer. See you tonight. Huang Guanzi did not get up. He only nodded slightly. Thus, the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea left, and the courtyard returned to silence. The rootless fire burned faintly. Huang Guanzi slowly ate the one in his hand. He ate very carefully, not letting go of a single bit of tender meat. After eating one, he seemed to want more, but he didn't eat any more. He took the remaining one from the fire, poked it with his finger, popped a hole in the fire pit, and threw the fish into it. Then he took the one that Lord Donghai left on the table, threw it into the hole, and buried it. After doing all this, he stood up and walked to the bamboo fence of the courtyard with his hands behind his back. By this time, the sky was getting dark. From this fence, one could see the sea through the sparse thin bamboo. The sky above the sea appeared a dim yellow, and the sunset was burning brightly. He looked for a while and sighed softly. Sigh. When the sunset was also burned out, and the bright moon appeared on the horizon, Huang Guanzi turned around. He began to walk in the courtyard, and each step was of different priority. It looked like the steps of you of the Xianmen, but inside it was completely different. The cultivators of the Xianmen could not see the trick in it, and the demons could not see it either. But those who knew about painting should be able to see some clues. He was painting with steps. It was just like what Li Yunxin did when she first saw the caravan of the Qiao escort agency, and was captured by the swordsman in the forest. She performed her painting skills in a very secretive way, in order to obtain some kind of magical power. This went on for a quarter of an hour. Huang Guanzi stopped. He stood still for a while, then said as if he was talking to himself, She's here. A while later. It won't be long. Lord Donghai doesn't look smart, but he's actually very cautious. I look like I can see everything here, but there are actually a lot of restrictions. I'm taking a risk now. So he was talking to someone. Her purpose in coming to the East Sea is unknown, but she should be here to help Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin. He stopped and listened for a while. His purpose is also unknown, but from what happened in the past, he probably just wants to live. The situation forced him to go against the current. At first, he wanted to look for Shinryu as a backer, but he found out that this backer is unreliable, and now he's planning to save himself. He doesn't care about our matter. What did the other side say? It seemed like they said a lot, but Huang Guanzi's face was as calm as still water. He listened and said he can be used. Yes, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm doing it too. It should be a coincidence. These days, he and I are doing the same thing. For the past year, I've been trying to provoke Lord Donghai and the other dragon's son to fight. But he always hesitated. Now that Li Yunxin is here, we can be considered to be combining strength and softness. He's not as polite to Lord Donghai as I am, and now this water demon is almost obedient to me. The other side spoke. It didn't say much, probably only 3 or 4 sentences. Huang Guanzi's face finally showed some expression. and he frowned slightly. Is this appropriate? He's not a quiet person. If he survives this time and grows stronger, I'm afraid no one will be able to control him anymore. After a while, he sighed helplessly. There's something that I shouldn't have said. But, don't bite off more than you can chew. This time the other side spoke even less, only one sentence. Huang Guanzi shook his head and turned around. With his hands behind his back, he wiped the ground with his feet, as if to erase some traces, and also as if he was thinking about something while wiping. Then he sat on the stone bench in the courtyard, closed his eyes and breathed in and out. Cultivator's breaths were extremely long. His cultivation should be considered profound, so it was even longer. 1 breath for nearly a quarter of an hour. After 10 breaths, footsteps came from outside the courtyard. Huang Guanzi opened his eyes and saw the officer next to Lord Donghai holding a white paper lantern, squinting at him and smiling. Sir, His Majesty ordered that you should interrogate the spy caught in the afternoon. This general will accompany you. Huang Guanzi opened his eyes and a light flashed. Ah, this general? The officer laughed. His Majesty said that when the sea surface is pacified, he will call me General Fubo. Huang Guanzi also laughed. What else did His Majesty say? The officer made a gesture of invitation. Only the matter at hand. Sir, that spy is bold. He dared to say that Sir is a fake. TSK. I think he is just a mortal. How dare he claim to be an emissary of the Freemasonry? As he rambled on, he guided Huang Guanzi away. When the two met Wu Jiasong, who claimed to be an emissary of the Freemasonry, the latter had changed beyond recognition. He should have been tortured. There were no wounds on his body, and there was no blood. However, his skin had turned blue and purple like a ripe plum. His skin was swollen, as if juice or pus could flow out if a needle was poked. His skin was swollen, as if juice or pus could flow out with a needle. Except for the stairs extending down from the wall on the side of the entrance, it was all seawater. Half of Wu Jiasong's body was soaked in seawater, like a pickled radish. The officer lifted the lantern, shone it at the entrance and said proudly. The thief boasted shamelessly, I have taught him a lesson on behalf of Sir. Now Sir can ask. I will hold the line for Sir. In the afternoon, Huang Guanzi told Lord Donghai that the two of them could confront each other. It seemed that the two of them were really called to confront now. The officer claimed that he had already taught Huang Guanzi a lesson, and was afraid that he had tortured Huang Guanzi to interrogate him. But this kind of thing was also expected, so Huang Guanzi did not take it to heart. He nodded slightly, and walked down the wet stone steps to see Wu Jiasong. This visitor who claimed to be an emissary must not have expected that he would end up like this. It had only been 6 hours since he arrived on the island. Not only did he not become a guest of honor, but he was also locked in the water dungeon. How could a mortal withstand the torture methods of a demon? If it were not for the fact that there were mortals on the island before, he would have died long ago. Now his arms were hung on the wall, and his head hung down powerlessly. But the pair of eyes on his blue and purple face were bright, like 2 stars in the dark prison. Seeing Huang Guanzi walking down the stone steps, he stared at him and squeezed out a hoarse voice from his throat. Hee hee. Hee hee. You are that Freemasonry emissary? You think you are the emissary of the Freemasonry? Huang Guanzi looked at him calmly for a while and sighed. He looked up at the officer and said, General, you are too heavy-handed. I am afraid that this person has lost his mind from the pain. After saying this, he lifted his foot and walked over. Wherever he passed, the water ripples seemed to be ironed out, becoming like the surface of a mirror. He walked 6 steps to Wu Jiasong's side and pointed at the wall. The shackles and chains were unlocked, and the man's body fell down. Huang Guanzi reached out to hold him, and then made a gesture in the void, and 2 yellow scarf warriors appeared. The 2 warriors carried a small litter. Huang Guanzi placed Wu Jiasong on it, then took a step back inside. You are just a mortal. To be able to endure such methods, and still call yourself the emissary of the Freemasonry. You are really unyielding. Sigh. Never mind. Seeing that you have the guts, let me ask you. If you are really a member of my society, but you came here on your own, because of our brotherhood in the same boat, I will definitely ensure that you leave the East Sea safely. If you are not, but someone from Southernwood House, I will also give you a quick death. As soon as he said this, Wu Jiasong forced himself to stand up and laughed coldly. Hee hee. The method you used just now, is it painting? The people from Southernwood House call themselves the old subordinates of the painting saint. Do you think I don't know? Huang Guanzi smiled. While leading the 2 yellow scarf warriors to follow him, he said, Brother, if you are really a member of my society, this method can't prove your innocence. Do you know Xi and Shilio? Wu Jiasong stared at him, wanting to say something but hesitating. It seemed that he knew, but he was worried that the other party was bluffing, so he kept his mouth shut. Huang Guanzi didn't care. He continued, Xi and Shilio is a member of my society. If you are really the person you said, you should know. Doesn't she have any methods of painting? Since Southernwood House calls itself the old subordinates of the painting saint, we should learn this skill. Let me ask you, since you said you are the emissary of the Freemasonry, which elder are you from? When he said this, he had already walked up the stairs. The junior colonel originally thought that he was going to interrogate him, but when he saw him bring the person out, he was at a loss for a moment. Huang Guanzi also smiled at him. Go and report to the Lord of the East Sea. Tell him that I have a way to tell the truth. Tomorrow morning, send this person to the palace in one piece, and let the Lord deal with him. The junior colonel was stunned and said embarrassedly, But the Lord ordered. Huang Guanzi smiled and sighed. All right. Did Juanshang order you to watch over him closely? Afraid that this person will suddenly attack and harm me? The junior colonel nodded hurriedly. Yes. After saying this, he realized that it was stupid and smiled embarrassedly. But Huang Guanzi didn't care. Then follow him. This friend. I asked you which elder are you from, why don't you say anything? The 2 yellow scarf warriors carried Wu Jiasong, as if he was walking on flat ground, without any bumps. But when Wu Jiasong was being tortured in the water, he still had some strength. Now that he was on the ground, he seemed to be more comfortable, but he seemed to be weaker. After a long time he said, Don't try to get information from me. Huang Guanzi laughed again. He didn't look like he was interrogating a criminal at all. This is a good excuse. If you can't answer anything, just say that you're worried that I'm trying to get information from you, and don't mention it. But have you forgotten your situation? Right now, it's not you interrogating me, but I'm interrogating you. You claim to be my emissary, so you have to show me something that can convince me. My Freemasonry used to have hundreds of elders and dozens of apostles, and countless connections in the human world. A few days ago, there was a big change, and many connections were broken. Even if I wanted to investigate your background, it would be difficult. If you continue with this attitude. When he said this, he was already out of the water prison. He turned to look at Wu Jiasong. I can't protect you even if I wanted to. Think carefully. Which elder are you from? And who are you working for now? If you can't answer, you'll die in the hall tomorrow. Wu Jiasong stared at him. But this time, he didn't seem angry but confused. You, he said hesitantly. Are you really one of my people? Say a name. Then you'll know whether I am or not. While the 2 of them were talking, the junior colonel was listening on the side. He didn't rush him, and he wasn't in a hurry. He seemed to have memorized every word and every expression on his face. He stared at Wu Jiasong, as if he wanted to see the words coming out of his mouth. After about 3 breaths, Wu Jiasong finally gritted his teeth. Daoist Mulian. Huang Guanzi smiled. Oh, that's him. Daoist Mulian is from Bingshu Grotto Heaven. He has 3 disciples. 2 of them are members of my people, and 1 doesn't know anything. I've never heard of him being involved in the secular world. Wu Jiasong widened his eyes. Daoist Mulian's first disciple, Great Immortal Fan Hua, was the one who introduced me into the society. Daoist Mulian is my ancestor. Are you really one of my people? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.